The main character stares at these tiny, chubby, and totally adorable little hands. She's racking her brain, trying to figure out who they could possibly belong to. And every single time it hits her, those are her hands. She just can't wrap her head around it. A woman walks up, calls her my lady, and asks what's got her so worked up that she's sighing like that. The little kid starts flailing her arms and legs, demanding they let her go, like, now. But since she's the daughter of a concubine, she still has to act all proper and dignified. Hearing that she's part of the royal family just makes the kid scream even louder to be released. So yeah, our girl got reincarnated in some parallel universe as a princess from the Joseon dynasty. And to top it off, she's stuck being the unpopular daughter of a concubine. You might think being the emperor's daughter means she's in for the high life, right? But with this little one, things are different. Even though she's a newborn, not many people are lining up to care for her. The wet nurse treats her like a princess, and the woman next to her is watching like she's the boss. So it's pretty clear our girl doesn't come from the best background. The life of a daughter born to an imperial concubine? It's no walk in the park. If her half-brother gets mixed up in some shenanigans, she could get caught in the crossfire, but hopefully she doesn't have relatives like that. Either way, the little tyke is glad she was born into the imperial family and doesn't have to worry about making ends meet. But right now, our girl is more worried about infant mortality rates. Judging by the fact that people are using modern language, this probably isn't a real Joseon dynasty. The wet nurse asked the lady why she had such a sour look on her face. The woman tugged at the ribbon on her chest, and the little one knew she didn't want to see that. But the wet nurse was super surprised that the little lady was refusing to eat, because she was sure the kid was just hungry. But it's totally normal for the little one to refuse something like that, especially since they were trying to sneak honey in there while she was feeding. Seriously, do these broads even know how bad honey is for babies? The girl never would have guessed that the stuff she learned taking care of her little brother with her sister would actually come in handy. Except he was taken from them in a car wreck when he was coming home with their parents. Her older sister worked her butt off to pay the hospital bills for their parents in the ICU, but they didn't make it either. Our main character was just in middle school back then, so it was really rough on her sister. She had to take care of her little sis and even put her wedding on hold, 'cause her sister kept saying she didn't care about it anyway. The main character doesn't even remember the dude her older sister was gonna marry. But every time he gave her gifts, he was also giving them to himself. One day, the girl got a script for a drama that was about to be released. And that day, leaving her part-time job, the main character thought she'd get to reading the script when she got home. However, a truck suddenly swerving out ruined her plans. Her last thought was what would happen to her sister, who was left all alone. Suddenly, the young girl saw her older sister taking care of her while she was unconscious. But for some reason, she's crying. But then, when the main character opened her eyes, she was reborn as a child in a world that looked like a historical drama. A woman approached the girl, wanting to pick her up. She looks a lot like her sister. Who would have guessed this concubine's voice would be a dead ringer for her mom's? It's kind of freaky how similar they sound. Since she looks just like the heroine's sister, the heroine sees her more as a sibling than a mother figure. The little one felt bad for leaving her sister all alone. It felt like something precious had been snatched away from her. The girl drifted off to sleep, but woke up soon after to voices arguing heatedly in the room. She was stunned when she heard her sister's voice. But it definitely wasn't her, so the main character had no clue who was holding her. The maid, Yoon, started begging to be allowed to take care of the young mistress just a little longer. But the request was denied because the concubine was unwell after giving birth. Now Yongbin will take care of and raise the mistress, so the mother can just rest. This woman didn't give a damn all this time, and now she's acting like she cares. For some reason, my sister looks like she's about to burst into tears. If she understands everything, then she shouldn't cause any more trouble. But the main character wasn't having any of that, so she started bawling her eyes out. She didn't want anyone taking her sister away from her. The woman, sounding like a mom, got flustered and figured the little lady was crying because she woke her up. She told the nanny to take the kid for now, but the little one didn't want to be separated from her sister, so she started kicking and screaming like crazy as they handed her to the nanny. They couldn't hold on to the little lady. Before she fell, the girl saw a look of pure terror on her sister's face. Even though the main character promised to treat her well, she still couldn't keep her word. But for some reason, it didn't hurt. That's because someone managed to catch the little girl. It was some boy, but the main character didn't know who he was. But seeing the dragon design on the young man's clothes, the little girl figured he was from the royal family. His Highness was immediately swarmed, and they anxiously asked if he was hurt. He calmly replied that he was fine. The heir was relieved that his sister was okay too. For just a second, the little girl felt relieved, because now she noticed the dragon pattern was damaged. But His Highness told them not to worry, because his clothes were only a little dirty, and it was fixable. But the main character knew the maid who'd have to restitch this complicated pattern would not be happy. The heir called his sister brave since she didn't even cry. As the crown prince, he's way higher in status than some concubine's daughter, so she didn't think he'd bother saving her. Yeonbin asked the prince what brought him here. Turns out he came to see his little sister, who'd been sick for a long time, and they couldn't celebrate her 100th day. But the prince almost witnessed a terrible accident. Yeonbin begged His Highness not to get the wrong idea. They were ordered to take the child and raise her, but the only problem was the maid, Yoon, who refused to give her up. However, the prince coldly asked how the only princess almost got hurt. Yeonbin apologized, and the heir told her not to forget what it meant to His Majesty to give her the child. The main character was getting curious about what he meant. Since his sister was scared, the prince suggested leaving her with her mom and Yoon a little longer. Yeonbin couldn't disobey His Highness. The little one realized the heir and the concubine are arguing over her right now. The prince added that he could personally inform His Majesty about the princess's well-being. Yeonbin promised to hand the princess over to the maid, Yoon. The main character began to sense a hidden power struggle in the palace. A servant approached His Highness and reminded him that he was running late. The little one clung even tighter to her brother because she didn't want him to let go and leave. The heir told her not to worry because he was going to tell their father everything. He handed the little one to the maid, Yoon, and asked her to take care of his sister. The woman took her daughter in her arms, tears of joy welling up because she could finally hold her child again. Even after their parents died, the sisters only had each other. The main character felt bad that she wasn't born the heir. If she had been, she'd be treated better and her sister wouldn't cry. Before leaving, the prince asked them to take care of everything. Yeonbin promised to do it all, but she remembered that someone else was waiting to see his only sister too. A little foot tapped the main character's shoulder, and a voice started demanding she wake up. The girl figured it was Yoon Si-eun, Yeon's younger brother, who was keeping her from sleeping. Their parents never punished the boy, so his two older sisters took over raising him. So, thanks to his sister's upbringing, the crybaby turned into a total chick magnet. But then he died in a freak accident. Realizing that, the main character's eyes snapped open, and she saw some random kid standing over her, poking her with his foot. He's no Si-eun, but still kinda hot, I guess. Looking around, the girl had no clue where she was. Her nanny, who always fed her honey, and the maid, who almost dropped her once, brought her here while she was napping. The kid, smirking like a jerk, called her ugly and annoying, all because she wasn't high status enough. The main character didn't say a word, and the boy coldly asked if she was really gonna ignore him. He suddenly yanked the little girl's arm. The maid jumped in right away, trying to explain to Master Kyanon that the princess was still just a baby. If anything happens to her, he's gonna be in deep trouble. But the prince just grabbed the maid by the hair and snapped, "How dare you interrupt me right now?" The maid started apologizing, but Kyanon just told her to get lost. It hurt like hell, but the woman didn't make a sound. The main girl started shaking all over because she had no clue what she was doing in a place this dangerous. Then Yeonbin walked in, looking pissed, and asked if she hadn't told them to take good care of the lady. Seeing the maid trembling, she asked Kyanon what the heck was going on. The prince explained he just wanted to mess around with his little sister, but some maid decided to get in his way. Her voice shaky, the royal concubine asked her son what he'd done to the kid. But Kyanon told her not to worry, because he wouldn't let the same mistake happen again this time. The main character froze, totally clueless about what was wrong with this dude. Yeonbin started explaining to her son that he needed to be nice to the heir, because he's still just a kid. The prince agreed with his mom, but she reminded him he couldn't call her mom in public. Back in the Joseon dynasty, the emperor's kids were born to concubines, but they all had to treat the empress like their mom. Out of nowhere, Gyeongon innocently asked his mom why she was given that thing. The concubine told the prince to watch his mouth because that girl is still his sister. Gyeongon finally agreed. The prince headed for the door, saying he had to get going. The door shut, and the main character felt a wave of relief, but then wondered, okay, What am I supposed to do now? Looks like Master Gyeong-on's a little put out by the lady's arrival. Ever since the Empress passed, he hasn't been with a woman in years, and then suddenly, Seyoon appeared. Youngbin said they don't know what the fallout will be after this pregnancy. There have been plenty of pregnant concubines before, but none of them were ever in favor, because most of them either miscarried or the kids were born weak and didn't make it. But it's a good thing that maid Yun gave birth to a girl. The maid told Youngbin there's nothing to worry about, since Yun wasn't the emperor's favorite. However, it's pretty clear that if His Majesty has a surviving child, he'll treat Yun well and visit her soon. But since that concubine is in poor health, Youngbin will take over raising the little one. In other words, this is that concubine power struggle the main characters already heard about. While Youngbin's raising the princess, she can use her as an excuse for His Majesty to come see her. Once she's pregnant, that's it, we're screwed? The concubine asked the maid if she really gave the baby honey while breastfeeding. She nodded, confirming it. But the kid kept refusing the honey, like she knew something was up because of her humble beginnings. So they were deliberately trying to feed the main character honey. The little one realized she could actually die if she stayed there. Our heroine wondered what she'd done to deserve this, because she never hurt anyone. She even gave her allowance to people who needed it. Now, the only way to survive was to make sure Youngbin paid the price. So, the main character started bawling her eyes out. The concubine froze up, then frantically told the maids to calm the little lady down, ASAP. The kid had goosebumps all over, thinking someone wanted to off her. The maids and nanny wanted to call a doctor, but Youngbin yelled that was absolutely out of the question. The concubine ordered them to shut the kid up, quick, before anyone heard her screaming. She grabbed a blanket and said they should muffle her with it, so the noise wouldn't be so loud. But Youngbin totally wasn't expecting to see the guy who just walked in on them. The emperor, furious, demanded to know what the heck Youngbin was doing. The concubine, voice shaking, tried to explain it was all a big misunderstanding, and the lady was just feeling a little chilly. The main character couldn't scream too loud under the blanket. But then, out of nowhere, she saw light. The guy scooped her up, and the little one noticed the dragon design on his clothes. She'd seen it before. The emperor trusted Youngbin with the kid because he figured she could take care of her. The concubine tried to make excuses, but the ruler wasn't even listening. The second he held the princess, she stopped crying instantly, which definitely raised some eyebrows. Youngbin lied, saying the lady just had a bit of a fever and she just wanted to check on her. But the emperor wasn't buying it and told the maid Kim to take the kid. So looks like our main character's getting dragged off somewhere again. The little one clung to her dad and started bawling even harder. The emperor's brow furrowed as he sternly asked why the kid was reacting like this to the one who's been caring for her since day one. He ordered that Youngbin was to be confined to her quarters for a while. Then the emperor ordered the royal physician to check on the baby's condition. From now on, the princess will sleep in the emperor's chambers. After they took the kid, she never went to see her. The empress lost several children, she's been through hell. But thankfully, she successfully gave birth to the current crown prince and then the princess. Everything was fine until the young princess passed away from an illness. The empress's mind and body weakened day by day. Then she took in a concubine's child to raise, but that one soon died too. The empress suffered terribly, and eventually she passed. There were plenty of women who managed to conceive, but not many of those kids made it into the world. No matter how many children the emperor lost, he could never get used to it. As soon as it got dark, he ran into the crown prince, who told him he'd seen the youngest child today. The emperor thought he was talking about Kyungwon, but the prince meant the youngest sister, who doesn't even have a name yet. The father reminded his son not to be too soft on his younger siblings. But the heir explained that she seemed like a strong and bright kid. But maid Yun's child has been sick since birth, so she could pass away any day now. The prince said that even though she was almost dropped, his little sister didn't even cry and immediately recognized him as her brother. That's why the heir thought she was strong and sharp. It would have been better if the emperor had just forgotten about the whole thing, but he couldn't even imagine that Youngbin could do something like that. As the adopted daughter of Counselor Hong Sang-jo, Youngbin had a decent status and even managed to give birth to Kyunon, the emperor's second son. Because Youngbin is the counselor's daughter, other officials support her too. If this woman can take good care of the princess right now, everyone will be singing her praises. But it would be better if Songbin, Kyungwon's third kid's real mom, was healthy, you know? The emperor just up and snatched the kid, so she's stuck in his room for the night. Man, wouldn't it be great if all the kids born here were as healthy as Kyung-won? The main character's eyes snapped open and she was immediately like, when the heck did I fall asleep? It's already morning. Right in front of her face, she saw dark hair on someone. The emperor noticed the little one was awake. The maids were all wide-eyed, staring at the emperor's chambers when they heard the baby's piercing cry. The ruler of the empire asked his first son why his little sister was crying. The heir smiled and told the baby to stop crying. The main character's tears vanished in an instant. The emperor showed up at just the right moment yesterday, probably thanks to the crown prince's words. The main character couldn't exactly hate her rescuer, so she crawled over to her older brother. The heir picked up the little one and smiled. Judging by how she went to him, she remembered he was her older brother. The emperor couldn't figure out why the kid would cry at the sight of the ruler of this country, but the main character just frowned. The heir guessed she was scared because she woke up in an unfamiliar place. But the real reason she started crying was simple. She woke up in the arms of some stranger, since she couldn't really make out his face last night. The main character couldn't believe her sister was involved with that kind of guy, which is why she was having a hard time adjusting. If mom and sis look alike, then maybe this uncle looks like her brother-in-law. The emperor couldn't figure out why the little one was cool with her older brother, but cried when she saw her dad. The heir figured the kid was probably just spooked by His Majesty's beard. The dude remembered the princess still didn't have a name and suggested giving her a temporary one. But the main character wasn't having it. She didn't need some lame nickname, she just wanted a real name. The prince grabbed one of the books off the table and told his sister to pick out a character she liked. When the main character was in school, she got decent grades in Chinese writing, but now she couldn't read a thing. Guess she'll have to brush up on her characters if she doesn't want everyone thinking she's a total dummy. There's gotta be a commonly used character around here somewhere. Okay, so the main character wasn't exactly a master of calligraphy, but she definitely remembered how to write her own name. So she pointed right at it. Turns out it was the character for Shia. The emperor burst out laughing, not believing his daughter actually liked that name. But the main character totally nailed it. Even though the little one picked it at random, the name actually means creating clarity, which is pretty cool. A little later, a servant offered the young lady something to eat, but Shia turned it down. The emperor was confused. How could she resist when she was clearly starving and hadn't eaten a thing? This lady probably wouldn't try anything crazy in front of the emperor, but Shia wasn't letting her guard down for a second. Because she just doesn't trust people. But out of nowhere, the emperor shoves a spoonful of food in the princess's mouth, saying she's hungry after all. Shia eats, but she feels uneasy, because even though her father's feeding her, he's still a stranger to her. The emperor smiled, seeing that the prince was right about things, and he kept stuffing food into his daughter's mouth. Shia started crying again, and the maid explained that babies often cry and get upset for no reason. Soon, Milady will get used to everything. The main character actually thought her father was this cold dude, but he turned out to be pretty normal. It's been a few days since she was brought here, but Shia's life hasn't really changed much. Just added a boring biological father who plays with his daughter without much excitement, and a handsome brother. Shia was wondering when she could go back to her sister. The emperor noticed the little one was starting to drift off, but she woke right up as soon as she heard voices in the room. The court ladies were gossiping about how the emperor's never been this nice, saying something must have happened in that annex. They're talking about where Yanbin lives right now. The women clammed up the second they saw the princess was awake. The main character froze, not seeing the emperor anywhere. Is it just these strange court ladies here? Where is everyone else? Shia started bawling, which totally freaked the women out. Pure terror washed over the little girl when one of the court ladies reached for her. The main character scrambled back in a hurry. Just then, a man walked into the room and demanded to know what the heck was going on. After a moment, the heir apologized to his mentor. The man was surprised to see a child in His Highness's arms. The prince smiled and explained that it was his little sister. Just minutes ago, he'd barged into his father's chambers as soon as he heard a loud baby crying. A court lady explained pitifully that His Majesty had stepped out briefly on business, and when the princess woke up, she got really scared. So that's how the crown prince ended up bringing Shia here. His Majesty needs to rest too, so the prince decided to help his father and personally look after his little sister. Even though Shia ended up here by accident, she shouldn't bother the crown prince because he's destined to become emperor. So the little tyke tapped her tiny hand on the book. But the prince took it like his little sis wanted to learn too, so he let her have at it. The tutor remarked that the young lady was really bright, and the prince puffed up right away, bragging that Shia even came up with her own name. She looked at the book and poked at a symbol she liked. The main character was sure the tutor was thinking this was total hogwash, but he wasn't saying anything. Shia mentally begged the crown prince to stop, or rumors might start that he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. Suddenly, some dude behind them smirked. Hearing that, the main character turned around. She glanced at the guy who's always behind the crown prince, but who was smiling for the first time she'd seen. Shia figured he was the prince's handler or something. All the warriors are old guys, and he's the only young blood here. Out of nowhere, the crown prince touched the princess's hand, even though he should have been hitting the books. Shia didn't get why he started squeezing her cheek. She was over it, so the little lady decided to take action. She hopped onto the teacher's lap and gave the crown prince, now sitting across from them, a real determined look. Everyone understood that the lady wanted the prince to leave her alone and just focus on his studies. As soon as the lesson wrapped up, the tutor figured His Highness's ceremony was coming up fast. Once his spot in the main palace is locked in, everyone's gonna have to get ready for the crown prince's wedding. His Majesty will be starting the selection process real soon to find a suitable match for his son. The main character managed to snag a ton of intel in such a short amount of time. But the prince asked his mentor not to bring that up, and the conversation turned into something like a grandpa scolding his grandson. But Shia put her hand over the prince's lips, 'cause he's still really young, and in moments like these, it's best just to smile and nod. The heir promised his sister he'd only play with her. His Highness turned around, hearing his father's voice. The emperor smiled, remarking that it looked like the prince enjoyed spending time with his sister. Dad heard Shia crying loudly again, but the heir replied that everything was fine now and there was nothing to worry about anymore. He heard his sister scream, so he went to her, and the little one immediately stopped crying as soon as he picked her up. The prince was stunned when his father wanted to take Shia, figuring his son was tired from watching her all day. But the heir told his father that he was probably the tired one, so he wouldn't mind hanging out with his sister a little longer. However, the emperor kept pushing and told the prince it wasn't good for a kid to keep changing where they slept. The main character doesn't care who she's with, as long as she's safe. Still, if she agrees to go with the prince now, she'll feel bad for her dad, because he's been working so hard to take care of her. Looks like he's already gotten attached to her. Besides, last time Shia felt like all the courtiers in the Eastern Palace didn't like her for some reason. Out of nowhere, the crown prince suggested they see who Shia would go to. That cracked up the emperor, since there's no way the little one would pick his brother, since he's the one who tucks her in and feeds her like a dad. The men sat across from Shia and called her to them at the same time. The main character wondered what the heck they were even doing. She still couldn't get used to having to do stuff like this, but she crawled forward anyway. But Shia can't just make a choice like that. The smartest move is to do the opposite of what they expect. The mentor, the maid, and the crown prince's escort all freaked out when the princess started crawling towards them. Shia decided to pick someone else. The young dude leaned in, totally confused, and looked at the princess. The emperor and his son were stunned, completely lost as to why the princess chose him. The escort figured the princess just wanted to get out of here. If that's what the princess wants, then he's got to go along with it. But the crown prince and his majesty are still waiting for her answer, so she needs to think this through. Shia couldn't understand why they were asking a kid for this, especially since she's so young. Finally, the main character completely lost it and started yelling like crazy. The prince told his dad it was the first time a kid ever chewed him out, but the emperor was in the same boat. Luckily, they both got Shia's message, so the main character was back in the main palace. The crown prince was bummed after saying goodbye to his sister, but hey, they'd see each other again tomorrow. Now, the emperor won't let his daughter out of his sight. Shia felt bad for the court ladies who had nothing to do with Yongbin, so the little one decided to be nicer to them. But a month had already gone by, and Shia couldn't stay here forever. It's great here and all, but if she keeps acting like this, she'll never get back to her sister. Ever since Yongbin took her away, the maid Yun has been so heartbroken that she's sick again. The main character was really hoping her sister would be all right. But the little one can't go on like this. We need to pull off one stunt, just one, that'll make the emperor realize watching a kid is seriously tough. The emperor kept racking his brain, trying to figure out what to do with Shia. Ever since he found out about her birth, the guy's been trying to show her as little affection as possible. The emperor came to the conclusion that he's just a terrible dad who can't take care of his kid properly. If Maid Yun raises the princess, he'd have to treat her like a concubine. And others would be nice to her if she got the title of Sukwan, which is the lowest rank among the emperor's concubines. But the officials will be against it and definitely raise hell. After Yongbin messed up taking care of the kid, the officials are now busy trying to protect her more. But then the question becomes, who do we entrust the princess to? When the little one's bored, she comes to her dad and just stares at the papers, doesn't touch a thing. Shia just likes to watch, and the emperor can totally leave her alone in the room, no sweat. And she's so freaking cute when she giggles. But His Highness really doesn't want to be apart from her. Suddenly, the guy noticed the kid wasn't where she usually parked her butt. Turns out, she'd gotten up and was waddling all clumsy-like towards the table with the vase on the edge. The emperor couldn't believe his daughter was actually standing. But then it hit him, the danger his kid was in right now, and he was off like a shot. Everyone standing behind him jumped when they heard the loud crash coming from the emperor's chambers. The crown prince's tutor threw open the door, all worked up, and asked His Majesty what was going on. But he saw something he really shouldn't have. So the teacher called for a healer, but the emperor was only concerned about how the princess was doing. The tutor suggested His Majesty really ought to move the young lady somewhere else, because today's incident was just the beginning. The emperor's first move was to get rid of anything dangerous in the room. The men let out heavy sighs and the main character joined in. The emperor asked, surprised, if he was the only one who thought the princess just sighed too. The tutor couldn't believe it and suggested that before the court ladies arrived, His Majesty help sort through all the important documents. That way, His Majesty can get back to his own business. Shia spotted a box and made a noise. The main character just wanted to stir things up, but never thought her dad would jump in and get hurt because of her. She felt so bad for the guy, because he's not getting any younger, you know? His joints ain't what they used to be. The emperor decided to show his daughter some things that the empress, the crown prince's mother, had left behind. These were gifts she gave him when he was still the crown prince, back when they used to sneak off for secret dates. So he and the empress had a really good thing going. But the guy felt like he was a complete screw-up when it came to his wife. The crown princess was chosen so young, which meant everyone started watching her every move. The elders said the crown princess was too gentle and the palace wasn't a place for people like that. The crown princess had a really rough time adjusting to palace life, so she ended up needing some help. Eventually, she started having one miscarriage after another and her firstborn son didn't live long. Since she couldn't fulfill her duty, she had to personally request a concubine take on the job. Luckily, the crown princess managed to give birth to a boy, so everyone thought the hard times were over. But fate's a real bitch, and in the end, the woman passed away. The empress, who still had a young face and kind eyes, once said she wanted to give birth to a beautiful princess. If she saw this tiny, soft little thing, she would have been so happy. The emperor figured that the maid, Yun, was probably missing her daughter terribly. Shia immediately made a happy little noise. The guy couldn't stop wondering what Yongbin had done to scare the kid so badly. For some reason, the little one started reaching for the pottery again. The emperor promised his daughter he'd get her one later, once she was a little older. You could tell by her eyes, the princess was really digging the pottery. Maybe the little tyke just liked how shiny it was. Still, that thing's a hazard to her right now, so the emperor told her to keep her hands off. Shia doesn't really get what she's doing yet, after all. The emperor's never been this close to a kid, so everything she does is brand new to him. But then the elder declared the Mother of the Nation title couldn't stay vacant any longer. Something had to give. That's when Hong Sang-jo, Yongbin's adoptive father, came to see the emperor. The empress's seat can't stay empty, so the state councilor asked His Majesty to make a call. But the emperor figured it was his business and nobody else's to butt in. Hong Sang-jo kept pushing it, which started to wake the princess up, so the emperor told him to keep it down. They must have come here because Yongbin got what was coming to her. The elders are sticking their noses in because they're used to the old emperor and don't like the way things are going now. Even Papyong's in that crowd. He's the prince's uncle on his mom's side. To protect the prince, they've decided to drag other members of Yongbin's family in here, replacing the old empress's family members. Even if the emperor promotes Yongbin to empress, the elders won't back down. They'll just start stirring things up again later. Hong Sang-jo kept pressing His Majesty for an answer. The little one woke up from all the noise and started crying. The elder and the others froze when they heard that. Hong Sang-jo didn't have a clue what that screeching was. It was enough to make your ears bleed. The emperor started trying to calm Xia down. And just like that, the little one's out cold again. Hong Sang-jo laid it on the emperor thick, saying only Yongbin deserves to be empress. We gotta make Yongbin the empress ASAP. Xia's starting to react to the advisor's voice again. For like the millionth time, Hong Sang-jo's begging His Majesty to make a decision. Every single time the princess reacts to those words. Finally, one of the guys told the elder to get a move on already. But Hong Sang-jo figured they needed to shut this whole thing down pronto, so they had to hustle. So, he explained to His Majesty again that if the position stays open, people are gonna lose it. The main girl couldn't take it anymore, crawled over to the elder and smacked him right in the face with her little hand. Everyone was totally stunned by that. Then Xia just grabbed Hong Sang-jo by the beard and started yanking him forward. The emperor scooped the little one up, but she just wouldn't let go of that annoying elder's beard. Once the girl finally released him, the emperor apologized to Hong Sang-jo, explaining, hey, she's just a kid. But he also said they needed to keep it down, because the princess might wake up and start wailing. Since the kid was having a rough day, the emperor suggested calling off the meeting for now. The elder stormed out of the emperor's office. He was fuming after that humiliation. Hong Sang-jo figured it was Yongbin's problem that she couldn't win the emperor's heart, even after giving birth. The guy was trying to give Yongbin a chance to step up and take care of the newborn princess, improve her standing, you know? To frame his concubine, he wanted to find a talented kid and adopt her. If Songbin hadn't popped out a third kid, things would be way easier. Knowing the emperor, either Yongbin or Songbin, the mother of the third prince, could snag the empress title. But she comes from a regular family, so the odds are slim. That makes Yongbin the top contender for the job. Now Hong Sang-jo's gotta sit tight and see how things shake out until this whole princess situation settles down. Here come those old geezers with the bushy beards again, trying to pressure the emperor to pick an empress. Usually the elders show up when she is still awake, but today they're here while she's catching some Z's. All the noise kept the girl from getting any decent sleep, so she just clocked the elder in the face. This whole thing is already wearing the main character thin. Seeing the princess awake, a pleased grin spread across His Majesty's face. Xia eyed him suspiciously, trying to figure out what to make of the emperor's expression. But right now, she was more worried about one thing. Where the heck was she? The old woman got to her feet and asked, was this really the emperor's precious little one? His Majesty confirmed it, nodding to his mother. In other words, the main character was now face to face with her grandma. The madam scooped the little one up into her arms. The emperor was surprised. The princess usually didn't go to strangers, but she went to his mother without a fuss. His Majesty's mother called the young princess a smart cookie. Xia didn't know why, but right now this madam looked kind of displeased. So the main character decided she needed to show off how cute she was and let out a happy giggle. The princess is usually so friendly with everyone, so I don't get why she got so spooked by Yanbin. Xia froze when she heard her mother's voice behind her. That royal concubine definitely got chewed out, but it looks like the emperor's mom summoned her. Madam suggested Yanbin try holding the princess again. Xia wondered if the emperor's mother was also a threat to her. She pushed herself away from the concubine and started bawling, and then she reached out her little hands to her dad, wanting him to pick her up. His Majesty promised his daughter that no one would dare touch her while she was in the emperor's arms. Then Madam sternly asked Yanbin what she did to the kid, but the concubine replied that it was just a misunderstanding. Since the child's so freaked out, Yanbin better get out of here. But the woman tried to explain that Kenan was over the moon whenever the madam and the emperor came to visit him. Only now did Xia notice this little weirdo standing next to Yongbin. That just made the main character burst into tears even harder. The emperor shot his second son a stern look. Kenan flinched as soon as His Majesty suggested he and his mother leave the room. They didn't put up a fight. But before the door closed, the second prince glared at the princess, and you could see the anger and contempt burning in his eyes. The emperor can't always be around to protect the main character. Then they started talking again about how the spot in the central palace has been empty for so long. The main character was already sick of these talks about the empress, so she decided to leave her father. Suddenly, she saw a group of women, and judging by their silk robes, the little one figured they were imperial concubines, which meant her sister could be here too. Since she is afraid of strangers, the emperor's planning to send her to the maid, Yun. But his mom suggested giving the kid to a concubine who's already got experience raising little ones. The concubines started smiling, seeing the little princess crawling towards them. The main character got bummed out, realizing her sister wasn't there. Suddenly, she heard the grandma ask if it was really okay to hand the kid off to just any old concubine. The adults jumped when the princess started wailing like crazy. The concubines were taken aback too, since the princess had been smiling the whole time, and now she was acting all weird. Shia felt bad for the concubines, but she couldn't do anything, because for her, this was a matter of survival. The emperor knew his daughter wasn't one to cry for nothing. Out of the blue, the kid tells His Majesty that his sister's probably looking for someone. The emperor, confused, asked Kyungwon what he meant by that. The prince explained that his sister crawled up to every concubine, then started checking each face, like she was searching for someone. The third prince's mother suggested that the young lady was probably missing her real mom. The emperor's eyes widened in surprise. The woman decided to risk suggesting to His Majesty that he give the young lady to Madame Yun to raise. More than likely, the princess just can't forget how genuine her mother was. That's why she's so drawn to her. The emperor agreed with Songbin and noted that she understood the princess very well. The main character immediately realized this woman was a good person. Subin's playing the caring princess, acting all motherly, but she's just racking up points, you know? Yeonbin took Shia in, but totally botched the job of raising her. Hard fail, to put it nicely. 'Cause Subin's a freaking pro at this game? The maids were freaking out, because the little miss took 7 steps all by herself. Maid Yoon squeezed her daughter tight, pouring out all the joy and love she felt right then. After that chat with the former empress, Shia met up with her sister again. The main character had to, charm some officials to make it happen, which kind of freaked them out. They knew if the lady was alone, she'd have given him a piece of her mind a long time ago. Then Shia left her little handprints all over the documents, and she was deliberately taking those first steps. But she'd still fall down sometimes, which worried all the adults. Still, the emperor always praised his daughter for trying. He was genuinely stoked about her progress. Once word got out the kid was walking, they decided to keep her away from the emperor as much as possible. Since Shia now had to live somewhere else, her sister got a serious upgrade. She became an official concubine, and suddenly everything, her clothes, her living quarters, was totally different. But our girl couldn't figure out how long she planned to keep this up. One of the maids noticed the young lady was feeling uneasy. Yoon apologized, admitting she was starting to think she'd never see her precious little girl again. The maid offered the lady a handkerchief, saying the kid shouldn't see her crying, or they'd start bawling too. The main character took the handkerchief and gently dabbed her sister's tears. Yoon smiled and said the lady had really grown up a lot. The maid reminded Her Highness that she needed to introduce her to her lady. The concubine told the main character that this was Ami, and she'd been a huge help this whole time. From now on, she'll be helping you too. The main character looked closely at her new acquaintance. Then her eyes narrowed and she got a suspicious look. After watching her, Shia concluded that her sister had picked a good egg. The other maids used to mess with Ami's clothes and give her a hard time. And then Consort Yun called her over and gave her a cookie. Just like the main character thought, her sister is seriously awesome. Shia heard they were so close that when her sister was expecting, she'd sneak in to see her and bring cookies. The main character was happy Ami was working here now because her sister's been way happier since. Maybe that Sonbin character had something to do with it. Ami asked her mistress if she didn't like the food. But the little one scarfed it down quick, which brought a happy smile to the maid's face. She seems like a good person, but can she really make it in this cutthroat palace? Just like the main character figured, other maids caught them pretty soon. They weren't happy that Ami had climbed the ranks so fast just because she knew Her Highness. The ladies were starting to doubt Ami's knowledge of imperial etiquette, which made them think she might pass on her bad habits to the kid. The maids were acting all high and mighty because they were sure Ami wouldn't dare rat them out to Her Highness. Shia couldn't wrap her head around bullying someone, probably because she was always busy with food before. They're treating the princess like she's a freaking baby who can't talk. Makes you wonder what goes down when they're alone together. The little one started thinking about what she should do next. A plan quickly formed in her head, and the main character immediately reached for a bowl of soup. She wanted those sassy broads to get what was coming to 'em, so she chucked the dish at 'em. The maid totally shrieked. Min Sangung, handmaiden to Consort Yun, grilled the servant about what went down. The girl explained that the moment her lady starts eating, she spills a bowl of soup on someone. Lucky for everyone, the soup was cold, otherwise the lady herself could have gotten hurt. Since Ami is watching over the princess, maybe she's hostile towards people who aren't treating her right. Min Sangong went to Consort Yun's chambers and found 3 court ladies whispering to each other. The girls were wondering how much longer they'd have to stay with a princess they disliked from the start. They only shut their traps when Min Sangong appeared right behind them. Eventually, they hired 3 new court ladies named Bayek, Volbi, and Sukwa. The main character knew this got back to people higher up, but things got sorted out faster than she expected. Before this, those servants blamed everything on Ami while they were out having fun and doing whatever they pleased. Looks like they finally assigned some decent help this time, and if anyone gives Shia a bad vibe, they're out of here faster than you can blink. Maid Bak asked the lady which color she'd be rocking today. Our girl's thinking, seriously? This skirt instead of the comfy pants they usually give me? Turns out Songbin's coming over, so Her Highness said to doll up the little miss in this. The third prince's mom brought some grub with her. She's just thrilled the new concubine is finally cleaning up her act. Yun thanked Songbin with a warm smile. Our heroine's wondering, what's Songbin doing here, and with a gift no less? The woman remarked that the little miss is doing well too. Shia was totally thrown when the third prince's mom offered to hold her. Lady Yun didn't hesitate to hand over her kid. Songbin introduced Kyungwon to his little sister and told him he had to look after her. The boy's cheeks flushed a little, and he told his mom he would. The main character remembered that she was only able to get to his sister because of him. He and Kyungan only have 1 letter different in their names, but the difference between them is night and day. Shia decided to give him a pat to show her thanks. The other women immediately started gushing, and the main character didn't even get why they were looking at her like that. Eventually, Songbin passed the baby to her son. The concubines noticed that their kids were getting along, but honestly, Shia was fuming, because nobody even asked them what they thought, and she was seriously uncomfortable. Subin suggested that Kyungwon take Madam outside for some fresh air, because they needed to have a word with Consort Yun. Shia couldn't figure out what they were talking about that required dismissing the court ladies. The main character was super curious, but Kyungwon explained that they shouldn't interrupt their conversation. Lost in thought, the main character realized that even though the prince was still just a kid, he was already a total heartthrob. Still, she couldn't stop him from doing anything, so she really hoped she'd grow up fast. Kyungwon noticed that his sister didn't act like a newborn at all. It seemed like she was seriously bummed out that she couldn't walk yet. But even when she finally gets the hang of it, her frustration isn't gonna magically disappear. Look, the palace is always a dangerous place, so the princess has gotta watch her step and everything she says. Kyungwon heard the crown prince is sweet on her, and yeah, their brother's a good dude, but best not to bother him. But Kyanon? Yeah, avoid him like the plague. Sounds like Big Bro's been through the ringer because of Kyanon. After a while, once Shia learned to walk, she finally understood what her brother meant. They found a dead crow in the courtyard. Ami immediately grabbed the little one, trying to keep her from seeing the body, but Shia already saw everything. Then the lady-in-waiting told Sohwa to get someone, like, now to clean up that bird. Ami picked up the little lady and asked, all worked up, if she was super scared. The maid wasn't too surprised by what she saw, since she used to work in the kitchen, so she knows what dead birds look like. Back in her previous life, the main character often saw pigeons getting hit by cars or crashing into windows. So Shia wasn't exactly scared, but the whole thing was still pretty messed up. How could a bird even smack into something hard enough to die inside the palace? Next thing they knew, they stumbled upon a dead rat. The court ladies totally freaked out, making faces and scrambling to get someone to haul the poor thing away. Ami suggested they find somewhere else to hang out. It feels like everyone was just panicking, but they're already getting used to this kind of thing, 'cause it's happening all the time now. People were saying a person was behind all these killings, and the only one the main character could think of was Kenan. But she kept pushing those thoughts away, convinced the prince wouldn't be so obvious about it. Suddenly, a guy popped up in front of Shia, surprised to see her wandering around on her own. The main character was stoked to see the crown prince and Kyungwon. The air was pumped to hear that their Shia was walking now. He reached out his hand, asking if the little one could come over to him too. Of course, the main character couldn't refuse her savior's request, so she ran and jumped right into his arms. The crown prince told Kyungwon that he used to be that small too, which even surprised the third prince. A happy smile lit up the heir's face as soon as he noticed his sister wearing the clothes he'd given her. It all clicked into place because lately the main character had been wearing more fancy outfits. The Crown Prince still cares about her a lot. Her older brother said that he and Kyungwon were tossing sticks into a container and invited her to join their game. The main character figured that sounded like a blast. But then her eyes flicked over to the third prince, and she saw the sour look on his face. Shia probably stole some time he was supposed to be spending with the Crown Prince, so Kyungwon was ticked. The main character got it. She needed to back off. Shia started squirming in her brother's arms, and he sadly asked if he couldn't hold her a little longer. The main character mentally begged the heir to look back and see the shining eyes of his brother. The main character kept complaining, and finally the Crown Prince let her go. It was time, so Shia bolted from her spot like a shot. The court ladies immediately chased after her, because she definitely shouldn't be wandering around alone. The Crown Prince sighed in relief, happy to see Shia growing up healthy. Then he knelt down and suggested Kyungwon continue their game. So Ami ended up catching the main character. The kid was seriously bummed, 'cause she really wanted to ditch everyone and be alone. I get that they're watching over her, but she hates having someone around her 24/7. Shia noticed it was her first time in this spot, where apparently there's always been this awesome pond. She reached out her hand, and Ami figured the princess wanted to check out the pond. The other servants were totally wiped out by the kid's stamina. Ami gave a sheepish smile and decided to take her herself. As soon as they got closer, the main character was blown away by how beautiful it was. Out of nowhere, she saw Kenan near the place. She hadn't seen him in ages and never expected to run into him here of all places. Suddenly, the kid heard a cat meowing. The third prince grabbed the pet and just chucked it right into the water. Ami and the main character were horrified by that psycho's cruelty. Shia was so freaked out she even got the hiccups. The third prince immediately turned around and asked, all pissed off, who was there, as soon as he heard a sound behind him. But there was nobody there. Kenan grabbed a fallen branch and said coldly that he definitely heard someone's voice. As soon as the second prince started heading their way, the main character began frantically thinking about what to do. If Kenan finds out they're here, the heroine didn't even want to imagine what he'd do to her. She could try screaming for help, but there's no one around, so it'll just make things worse. Shia froze, hearing a familiar voice call out to Kyanan. It was Kyanwan, and the second prince figured something must have happened for his little bro to come looking for him. Kyanwan asked the prince what he was doing out here all alone. The second prince snapped, "What's it to you what I'm doing?" Kyanwan suggested seeing the crown prince, who had a free moment, but immediately got smacked in the hand with a branch. The second prince said coldly, "Don't get so full of yourself." Kyanwan wanted to talk to his brother, but Kyanan yelled, "You're no brother of mine!" You hang around the crown prince because you think you can get something out of it. Kyanan had finally found a good plaything, but the third prince ruined his whole vibe. Kyanwan sighed in relief as soon as his older brother left. First thing he did was pull that cat out of the pond. He swore she wouldn't get hurt again. Then the second prince walked over to the tree, asking his sister and her maid if they were all right. So Kyungwon knew they were here all along. The second prince called Jason over to him. The attendant took the cat from the prince, looking pretty annoyed. Kyungwon told him to chill, said this kind of thing happens all the time, and told him not to breathe a word of it to Mom. The little one reached out to the second prince. Kyungwon took care of that nut job, protected his sister, and even saved a cat, and he's still just a kid. The prince asked if she was actually worried about him. He told his sister he was all right and that he didn't let Kyanan hit him too hard, which is exactly what he was going for. The main character was totally lost. She couldn't believe he was talking about something like that so casually. In a serious tone, Kyungwon told his sister to stay away from places where there aren't any people from now on. Besides, Kyanan hangs out here a lot, so the princess should probably avoid coming here if she can. Now Shia understood why Sonbin wanted to mess with Yongbin. That woman clearly knew where her kid was. But Kyungwon really wanted to play with the crown prince, but he had to come here because he was worried about her. The second prince said with a smile that she had that mature look on her face again. If she's this worked up already, what's gonna happen later? Kyungwon felt this urge to touch his sister, and she didn't even realize what was going through his head. The crown prince had been behind that tree the whole time, but our heroes had no clue. A few days later, Kyungwon asked the little one when she was finally gonna learn to talk. The main character got all worked up about the question like, "Dude, you've been asking me this for days." His Royal Highness, the first prince, also wants to hear something from his sister, so Kyungwon asked her to call him brother. Truth is, Shia didn't want to talk cause her pronunciation was kinda rough, so she just started wailing on her brother's face. The heir figured Shia was just punishing her brother for, pushing her buttons. The third prince started explaining that their sister's got a real temper and throws her hands around whenever you say something to her. But she acted totally different around the first prince. Kyungwon pouted, not understanding why his sister was always so mean to him. The main character stuck her tongue out at him like, "You gotta step up your game, bro." After that whole pawn thing, Kyungwon started teasing her, even called her ugly once. Shia totally lost it and snapped back hard at that. But Kyungwon's a good dude. He just says the dumbest stuff sometimes, and it makes it hard for her to keep her cool. Suddenly, Shia remembered that back in this era, people sometimes called their kids ugly on purpose. Now the main character realized she'd been way too rough on her brother, smacking him on the head like that. The second prince flinched the second the little kid touched his head. Something felt off to him, but the main character thought his reaction was super cute. Kyungwon started frowning, so Shia decided to smooth out his eyebrows for him. Next thing you know, they both tumbled to the floor, and the crown prince just smiled warmly, saying they looked happy. Kyungwon told his brother to stop staring and help get his sister off him, because Shia was getting pretty heavy. The main character started complaining again, like, how could she be heavy? She just learned to walk. But the heir snatched up the little one and told Kyungwon to work out if his sister was too much for him. Their Shia's so beautiful, so the prince figured that's why Kyungwon was so salty. He really wished the princess would start talking soon though, cause there's a lot he's dying to hear from her. Shia thought she could keep pretending she couldn't talk for a while, but it looked like she couldn't keep it up any longer. So, in a childish voice, she said she was already full. Whatever, people might think something's up with her, but Shia wanted to start talking when her pronunciation was better. The next day, the main character went out for a stroll. Ever since that incident at the pond, Shia only goes where there are lots of people with Ami. The emperor could show up near this building any second, so even if Shia sees Kyungwon, he won't mess with her. The pond was a different story, nobody around for miles. Suddenly, someone asked Shia what she was doing there. The second she was thinking about His Majesty, boom, there he was right in front of her. The little kid was totally lost. She hadn't seen her real dad in forever. A shadow crossed the emperor's face, and he sadly asked how a kid could treat their own father like that. First things first, gotta build bridges, so our girl leaps right into His Majesty's arms. The ruler chuckled, saying it had been a long time since she'd given him a hug. The main character noticed that His Majesty looked way more worn out than before. Those geezers must be giving him a hard time, day in and day out. Shia gave her dad a little pat, and the guy instantly lit up, realizing she was trying to comfort him. Even though she's just a little kid, she already knows how to respect her parents. The main character flinched when the emperor asked Yongbin what brought her here. The concubine apologized and explained to His Majesty that Kyonan missed him terribly and she couldn't stop him. The second prince backed up his mother's story. Kyonan's act was amazing because anyone would think he was such a good and polite kid. Yongbin suggested they go inside the palace and she'd arrange for snacks to be prepared for the princess. The main character had absolutely no idea what she was talking about right now. The little one definitely didn't want that, so she clung even tighter to the emperor. His Majesty didn't understand why she was suddenly so scared again. He apologized to Yongbin and explained that he was unfortunately busy today, so he wouldn't be able to make it. The concubine knew the emperor was busy with affairs of state, but she just wanted him to get some rest. Yongbin offered to take the princess, but the emperor said he needed to calm Shia down so she shouldn't worry about anything else. His Majesty turned away, and Shia thought she heard teeth grinding. Just like the little one figured, Yongbin and Gyeongun were glaring daggers at her. Tears welled up in the princess's eyes again, and the emperor was once again clueless as to what was wrong. But Yongbin's glare from under her brow sent chills down her spine. The maids told concubine Yun that Yongbin was treating them really rough, even though they hadn't done anything to her. The girl's shins were covered in scrapes and bruises. Looks like it's a warning because Yun's getting His Majesty's favor. Shia figured Yongbin was gonna pull something but never thought she'd take it out on the maids. Ami told her ladyship it didn't hurt that bad, so she shouldn't worry about it. Yongbin's just flexing her power, showing she can stick her nose in state affairs. But Yun's starting to sweat that Yongbin might start treating the maids even worse because of her. One of the girls suggested Her Highness try to win over His Majesty, get him to visit only her. Thing is, Yun knew damn well things probably wouldn't change, even if she got in the Emperor's good graces. Lately, the main character's been feeling down in the dumps because of this gloomy vibe. If she were actually a kid, she would have cheered herself up ages ago. Xia heard from the maids that Chuyandan Palace has a bad rep, but it never reached the Emperor's ears. So the main character needs to somehow tell her dad about it. Kyungwon's hands are tied too. If he says the wrong thing, he's gonna catch a lot of flack. Plus, it'd be sus if Xia suddenly started talking after being mute for 2 years, right? No matter how hard the main character racked her brain, she just couldn't figure it out. The ladies-in-waiting noticed the young miss was getting bored, so they suggested a stroll outside. Xia, of course, jumped at the chance. And just when she thought her mood was about to turn around, the main character ran into a total nutjob. Kyungwon grinned and asked if it was really his sister, saying it had been ages since she played with her big bro. The main character hid behind one of the lady-in-waiting's skirts. The maid tried to explain that the young miss was too little for games, but he threw a fit about it. He shoved her aside, snapping that she dared to block his way. Then Kenan grabbed the princess roughly, saying he just wanted to teach her a little lesson, and dragged her along. The prince's attendant stepped forward, but Kenan ordered him to stay out of it and stop the princess's servants. The girls were terrified, but there was nothing they could do. The attendant explained that if they screamed, they'd only make him angrier. But one of the ladies-in-waiting wasn't giving up and decided to take matters into her own hands. She followed the second prince, who was still dragging the princess along. The main character was relieved to see at least one maid was following them, but she had no idea where Kenan was taking her. Soon they arrived at that pond they'd visited last time. Horrifying possibilities immediately flashed through her mind. She dropped to her knees in front of him, begging him not to do it. But Kenan just called the maid an idiot and asked how she dared disobey him. It was only now that the main character realized this was the same girl Kenan had grabbed by the hair when she tried to stop him. This maid had tried to help the heroine, even though she knew she'd catch the second prince's wrath. Kenan shoved Xia away roughly. First things first, he decided to start with disciplining the maid. The girl crawled away, terrified of what her master might do to her. Kenan raised his hand and yelled at the idiot, saying she should finally learn who's in charge. The maid squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow. The main character couldn't just let this happen. So she bolted and shoved the second prince in the back as hard as she could, totally catching him off guard. The kid completely lost his footing, and the next thing you know, he's in the drink. Xia meant to stop him from hitting the servant, but she never thought she could actually knock him into the water. Guess the little lady's got more muscle than she thought. The prince surfaced, and the maid immediately started freaking out, asking if he was okay. Kyanan started calling them both a bunch of dummies, yelling that he wouldn't let this slide. The main character almost cracked up at his furious face, but she had to act like she didn't know what was going on. So, Xia started bawling her eyes out while the lady-in-waiting screamed for help. But nobody came, so the maid decided to take a gamble. Eyes squeezed shut, she jumped into the water to save His Majesty's second son. Thing is, this lady-in-waiting couldn't swim a lick, so now both of them needed saving. She did it so she wouldn't get yelled at for just standing there watching. Soon, the second prince's escort came running at the sound of the screaming. Both heroes ended up back on the bank. The main character's other maids showed up too, so she immediately ran to them. The lady-in-waiting hugged her mistress, assuming she was super freaked out seeing all this. Kyanan got to his feet and demanded to know how this idiot dared to chuck him in the pond. But the main character really didn't mean to, so now she was totally lost on what to do. Right then, a rescue showed up all on its own. The maid could finally catch her breath after all that running. The crown prince wanted to know what the hell was going on, why Kyanan was soaking wet and Xia was crying. The main girl was like, "How does my brother always show up at the perfect time?" She bolted straight for her brother. The crown prince hugged Xia, figuring she was probably scared out of her mind. So all that chaos finally wrapped up when the first prince showed. Even though Kyanan's a jerk, he's not dumb enough to pull any blatant crap in front of the crown prince. But revenge was definitely on the menu. Since Kyanan can't openly mess with the princess, he's decided to take out his anger on the animals. He used to make it look like accidents, but now the animals are turning up. Well, let's just say it's getting pretty brutal. Xia was starting to sweat it, wondering if the servant was gonna be okay. She probably really pissed off Kyanan by sticking up for her like that. The main character was wondering if she could even go crying to the emperor and crown prince about all this later, because she wasn't sure the emperor would even take her side. No matter how messed up the prince is, he might still be more important to the emperor than the princess. The maid suggested the little lady take a walk, but Shia couldn't because she was scared of running into Kianon. Then the court lady suggested stepping away for a bit and grabbing a drink, and Shia agreed since Kianon was somewhere else right now. On the way to her safe stroll, the main character stumbled upon another conversation between the emperor and the elder. Hong Sangjo was still pushing to find the empress, and the main character was actually surprised by how persistent he was being. Best not to let them spot her right now. But one guy did spot her, though. She gestured for him to act like she wasn't there. The dude with him immediately grinned, like he totally knew what the princess was getting at. But he asked His Highness if he saw who was hiding behind the tree. The attendant explained that it was the lady, but the emperor was wondering why she was hiding then. The servant guessed that the princess was probably planning a surprise for His Highness. The main character started freaking out when the emperor headed her way. You could totally see the anticipation in his eyes. Shia was racking her brain, trying to figure out what she could do for him, especially since they'd barely known each other a year. An idea popped into her head, and the heroine was out of options. She jumped out from behind the tree like a shot, totally catching the emperor off guard. A huge, happy grin spread across the main character's face. The emperor started smiling back, just as happy. He scooped the little one up in his arms, called her a smart cookie, and said she was definitely his daughter. But the truth is, she's only so smart because she's already living her second life. The emperor told the elders to beat it because they were giving him a headache again, and he wanted to hang out with his daughter. But Hong Sangjo reminded the emperor about that whole coup thing he warned him about, basically saving his bacon. His Majesty himself said he'd never forget that help, so he shouldn't be acting like this now. Thing is, Shinho was also considered a loyal subject before the coup, so the emperor just learned a hard lesson. But the main character didn't understand any of this secret guy talk. One thing was clear, the bureaucrat had sniffed out a power grab and now figured the emperor owed him big time. Looks like he's not thrilled with His Majesty's moves. Dude's radiating disapproval. If historical dramas are anything to go by, this old geezer could have framed someone else, but Shia couldn't be sure. The main character briefly wondered if the emperor even knew what went down at the pond. Glancing at his daughter, the emperor figured she was wiped out from the long journey. Truth was, Shia was really hoping they'd stumble across some dead critter so the emperor would get a clue about Kianon's threats. But then, out of nowhere, they heard the princes arguing. Kyonwon was insisting the second prince was behind it, but Kianon was flipping out, calling it slander. The third prince chimed in, saying there was definitely something at Kianon's feet, but Kianon shot back that he had no idea what it was. The main character couldn't figure out why the second and third princes were arguing right in front of her house. The guys shut up the second the emperor asked them in a stern voice what they were doing there. His Majesty ordered them to explain everything to him immediately. Kyungwon explained that animal corpses were being found frequently near where concubine Yun was now living. The emperor looked at his son, puzzled. So the third prince decided to investigate, and while checking things out, saw Kyungwon near the palace. And then he saw an animal carcass lying at his brother's feet. The emperor learned from concubine Yun that this was true. So His Majesty sternly asked the second prince what he was doing there. Kyungwon calmly replied that he simply came because he wanted to see his one and only sister. Since she's not big on socializing, the prince just wanted to watch her from a distance. Kianon's straight up lying right now, 'cause there's no proof against him. Everyone pretty much knows who did it, but sadly, they haven't invented security cameras in this world yet. Kyungwon's staying quiet because he knows there's no point in saying anything. See, the emperor doesn't know what Kianon's really like. The emperor chewed out Kyungwon for accusing someone without solid evidence, especially his older brother. The third prince offered his apologies. A smug grin spread across Kyunon's face. Kyungwon flinched when he saw that. Looking at his son, the emperor asked sternly if he had something he wanted to say now. The main character started fidgeting with her hands. The emperor didn't get what was up with her. She's probably acting like this because he scolded her older brother. Looking at the maid, Beck, the main character noticed she looked different than usual. She whispered, trying to calm her mistress, explaining that Master Kianon would be somewhere else today, and they just needed to steer clear of him. Maybe Kianwon arranged for Bayek to take her for a walk so he could go check on the animal. Shia wondered if he didn't want her to see the, situation. So, now the main character's supposed to take his side? Kyungwon apologized to His Majesty for causing him concern due to his carelessness. The emperor understood his worry for his sister, but everything needs to be kept within reason, so he asked his son to apologize to his brother. Kyungwon sincerely apologized for the misunderstanding that caused the second prince trouble. Kyungwon knew his younger brother could be a bit of a knucklehead sometimes, so he'd definitely be more careful from now on. But the emperor sternly told his son that he had no right to criticize his younger brother. He's not supposed to just waltz in here, so those actions made Kyungwon suspicious. The emperor reminded Kyungwon that he needed to act like a proper prince. Both of His Majesty's sons need to go to their rooms and think about what they've done. Neither of the princes put up a fight. With her arms crossed, Yongbin scoffed, wondering if she was trying to get the emperor's attention by having him tied up in Shia. Yun replied that her mistress just happened to run into His Majesty. She also apologized to the imperial concubine. Aunt Yongbin's been showing up a lot lately just looking for a fight. Since the royal concubine can't yell at the princess, she's decided to take it out on her mom. Yongbin told Yun to take good care of the princess, so this kind of drama doesn't happen again. Without an empress around, things are just falling apart. No discipline, no order. Later, concubine Yun met with Songbin, who found out that Yongbin had been visiting her, again. The main character was happy that her sister and Songbin were getting closer. Yun asked where Kyungwon was, and Songbin said he hadn't left his room since that day. The dude said he can't disobey the emperor's orders, and plus he really doesn't want to see that guy. Shia decided to get out of there, since there's nothing for her to do anyway. She slipped out the exit real quick. The maid jumped up and promised their highnesses she'd bring the little lady back right away. But Sukwon gave the okay for the young lady to do whatever she wants. Even though Kyungwon was punished unfairly, he's obediently carrying out the emperor's orders. The main character really wanted to thank him when they met. Suddenly Shia heard a familiar voice. He was reciting Confucius, saying you can't just go around hurting people because it always comes back to bite you. The names of our parents will be passed down to future generations. It's how children show respect. The door burst open and the princess appeared in the doorway. She smiled happily because she'd finally found the third prince. Kyungwon realized the princess had come with her mom. The main character shoved a treat right into his mouth. She just saw her brother and she's already stuffing his face. Chewing on the sweet, the prince explained he didn't do it because of her, but because some seriously messed up stuff is going down at the palace. The main character just bonked him on the head in response. Even though mom yelled at him, it's not like he did anything wrong. It was pretty clear now that Kyungwon got a serious dressing down, and Sungbin didn't want the main character and her sister to find out about it. Judging by how quiet Sungbin's being, looks like she's trying not to push the emperor's buttons any more than necessary. Since Kyungwon caused her trouble, the third prince couldn't just pretend he didn't know anything, so he decided to take action. The main character hugged her brother, and tears started welling up in his eyes. He squeezed his sister tighter. No matter how grown-up Kyungwon gets, he's still an 8-year-old kid at heart. Even if he didn't do anything wrong, Dad got mad at Kyungwon, and for the boy, that was a terrifying and scary ordeal. Shia couldn't even imagine how tough it must have been for the third prince because of Kyungwon. Kyungwon's eyes widened as soon as the little one said everything was okay. He abruptly pulled back and looked at her, totally bewildered. The third prince was floored that the princess could talk. The main character chuckled cheerfully and added that it was a secret. The concubines followed into the room, where Kyungwon was now, hanging out with the princess. Stepping inside, Sonbin's first move was to check on her son, who was playing around with the little lady. Kyungwon froze, his little cheeks turning beet red the second he saw his mom in the doorway. The concubine burst out laughing at the adorable scene. After that, Songbin took even better care of the princess and her mother. Looks like the sister sensed something and decided it was in her best interest to befriend Songbin. No matter what Yongbin did or said, the emperor still came to visit and was always extra nice to them. Every time the second son's mother would threaten Yoon, saying her day of reckoning was coming. Of course, Yongbin reacted even more strongly, but what can you do? But at least she is happy that Kyungwon is still being punished, so they definitely won't run into each other. A maid brought the lady a traditional Korean sweet rice drink and offered her a taste, but the court lady asked her to bring some snacks as well. It'd be sweet if they could sneak a bite too. The girls promised the princess they'd be back quick with something yummy and hurried off with the treats. Just one lady in waiting stayed behind with the princess. She handed the princess a plate with a drink, but it was a little tough for her to lift. So she accidentally dropped the whole thing. Shia shot a dirty look at the maid, who's supposed to be feeding her, not handing a kid a ceramic plate. The lady-in-waiting immediately apologized and started fussing. She said she'd run and grab some cleaning supplies and bring a fresh drink right away. This all happened because the main character officially doesn't have another nanny, and Ami's off today. Looking at her hands, Shia suddenly wanted to get cleaned up. Suddenly she heard this weird noise. The princess got spooked when a familiar face popped up next to her, asking with a smirk why she was all alone out here. The main character flinched and froze, scared stiff. She had no idea what Kyanan was doing here. The prince casually asked why she looked like she'd seen some kind of monster instead of her own brother. Because of her screw-up, he got punished. But the princess was born to a commoner, so what else did you expect? Today, the second prince brought his sister a generous gift, so now she owes him big time. Shia got the hiccups the second a mangled bird carcass flew past. That psycho just did that. Looks like Kyanan's so cocky he thinks he's untouchable, like nobody's gonna notice. For the second prince, this was a real treat, 'cause normally Shia's fearless, but now she's actually scared. He asked if she seriously thought she was on the same level as him, 'cause pretty soon, the same thing that happened to that bird is gonna happen to her. And then the second prince just lunged, reaching out for the princess. But our girl reacted fast, grabbed an empty plate and slammed it right over Kyanan's head. The second prince instantly clutched his forehead and called his sister a real piece of work. Now the main characters got the perfect chance to use her secret weapon and get rid of this psycho. Shia screamed at the top of her lungs. The maids heard that sound immediately and rushed to their mistress. The second prince muttered a curse under his breath and hurried away before anyone spotted him. When the court ladies returned to the princess, they were immediately horrified to see a bloodied bird next to her, and the princess herself was covered in blood. The emperor couldn't fathom who dared to harm the princess within the palace walls. Kneeling, Consort Yun began to beg His Majesty to find whoever dared to threaten the princess. The emperor's jaw tightened with rage. He vowed to conduct a thorough investigation and catch the culprit. Also, palace security would be increased, so the emperor asked Yun not to worry and to go rest with the princess. Because of the investigation into this incident, all the palace servants were going through a rough patch. But unfortunately, no one managed to discover that Kyanan was the one responsible. Since Kyanan's still a kid, his voice got mistaken for a woman's, so only the court ladies were suspects. The investigation ended up screwing over a bunch of innocent servants. My sister was so messed up by what happened that she had to beg His Majesty to call off the investigation. It was a real mess, and it sucks that they never found the culprit. Sonbin reminded the concubine that she was now in a position to enjoy the emperor's favor. He even bumped Yun up a rank, which made Yeonbin so furious that even the servants were scared to walk near her room. Just then, the emperor showed up and asked what they were all so happy about. And so this little slice of paradise lasted a bit longer. But the thing is, the empress's seat is still empty, which means they're all sweating bullets over at the main palace. The officials keep using the missing empress as an excuse whenever problems pop up. Shia couldn't even imagine what would happen to Kyanan if she suddenly revealed that he was the one killing the animals. But the emperor and everyone else has to find out about what the second prince is doing. Now she just needs to figure out how to make that happen. The main character just couldn't wrap her head around why the emperor couldn't see Kyanan for who he really was. His Majesty told his daughter that it was time she learned to talk. He suggested the princess start by trying to call him father. Consort Yun told the emperor that they went to the doctor, and he said there were no problems, so they shouldn't worry. If that's the case, the man was happy, but he still wanted to hear his little girl call him father. Shia started to fuss, which meant she wanted to leave. Since Yun graced him with her presence, the emperor suggested they take a walk together. Lady Yun couldn't pass up an offer like that. Soon after, our main girl got her chance to spill the dirt on Kyanan's messed up deeds. The emperor and Lady Yun took a stroll, holding the princess's hands. The weather was killer, so our girl wanted to check out somewhere she hadn't been before. Since she's with the emperor, there's nowhere she can't go. But Shia suddenly remembered that Kyungwon and Kyanan's situation had just been resolved. That gave the little princess a bright idea. Yeonbin flinched when she saw the emperor and Yun with the princess. Spotting the lady, His Majesty asked her what she was doing there, and she said she was just taking a walk. She wasn't expecting to run into the big guy. Usually, Yeonbin's always stoked to see His Majesty, but she looks kinda worried today. which means she's hiding something. Like maybe what Kyanon's up to right now. Yeonbin told the Emperor it was a perfect day to take a stroll. Suddenly, the main character bolted and ran towards the pond. Yeonbin immediately told the Emperor she had something important to tell him. If the second prince hangs out by the pond a lot, he's probably there now. Kyanon turned around, hearing a noise behind him. Seeing the princess, he immediately grinned, thinking this idiot walked right into his trap. The prince asked angrily if she even realized the trouble she'd caused him that day. The main character was stoked to see Kyanon's face all puffed up after she clocked him with that ceramic plate. Kyanon was still fuming about that whole thing, so the timing of this idiot showing up is just perfect. He's gonna teach her a lesson this time for sure. The main character was betting they were looking for her. She spotted a familiar old dude hiding in the bushes. The second guy grabbed the princess by the collar and barked, asking how she dared to blow him off like that. Out of nowhere, Shay asked if he seriously thought he was gonna amount to anything. Kyanon jumped, hearing his sister's voice for the first time. The main character pointed out that his mom couldn't even become empress, so he's definitely going nowhere. He might say she was born from a commoner, but at the end of the day they were both born from a concubine. So basically Kenan's just the kid of some regular concubine too. Even if everyone finds out he's been messing with animals, this prince is probably just gonna get a slap on the wrist. That's why Shay has no choice but to push his buttons. Kenan grabbed the main character by the collar, rough as hell. And the next thing you know, she's flying into the pond. Shay started sinking like a rock. She felt a sharp pain, even though she thought it wouldn't be that bad. Gotta stay calm and try to swim up, 'cause they're far from anyone and it'll take forever for someone to rescue her. But with her clothes soaked, the main character's body was getting heavier and she couldn't swim anymore. Shay's consciousness started fading, and she silently begged someone to save her. Someone grabbed her hand, and just a few moments later, the main character found herself on the shore. The first thing Shay saw was Kyunwon's tear-streaked face. She touched her older brother, silently begging him to stop crying because it hurt her to see him like that. Shay still didn't understand who had saved her. It turned out to be the crown prince, who asked with relief if she even knew how worried he'd been. Soon, the adults rushed over to the kids. The crown prince immediately asked His Majesty to call a doctor right away. Something clearly went wrong for Kyunwon. The main character's body felt heavy because pulling off her plan took more energy than she'd expected. Looks like all her effort wasn't for nothing. Shia reached out to His Majesty and quietly called him father. And then the little one passed out, never even seeing the emperor's shocked face. Yeonbin shouted that they couldn't let this slide. Her son was falsely accused last time, and now it's happening again. Shia woke up from all the yelling and felt like her head was splitting open. Sanbin reminded His Majesty that Kyungwon had always looked after the princess and couldn't have done anything in such a terrible situation. Yeonbin started getting even angrier because now Kyungwon was being blatantly accused of deliberately harming the young lady. All this arguing was already giving the emperor a headache. Guess they haven't figured out that Kyungwon tossed her in the water. Seeing that the little lady had come to, they immediately reported it to His Majesty, and the emperor perked right up. He scooped his daughter up in his arms, asking anxiously if she was okay. But the main character was clearly not okay. She had to live through that nightmare, and nobody even noticed, which is totally messed up on the adult's part. Shia burst into tears, pointed her finger at Kyonan, and called him a jerk. The emperor totally ignored that, more excited that his only daughter had started talking. So she really did call him daddy last time. The main character didn't think he'd be that happy about it. Kyunwon spoke up, telling His Majesty that he'd already heard Shia talking before. The main character froze, not sure what her brother was about to say next. Kyonan explained that because he was annoyed Shia was being informal with him, he taught her the word brother. But since that word was a mouthful for her, she kept her lips sealed. Now the emperor was starting to think Kyonan tossed his little sister in the pond on purpose, all because she called him brother. The second prince immediately piped up, saying that wasn't the case at all. She definitely got under his skin, and Yeonbin's too, so he lost it. The emperor couldn't believe his own son would throw his little sister in a pond just because she rubbed him the wrong way. Kyonan kept denying he was guilty, and then His Majesty asked if he'd stand by his claims. After Kyonan said yes, a servant entered the room. The emperor ordered him to repeat what he'd already told him. The old man explained that Kyonan was near the young lady right before she fell into the pond. Since it was just the two of them, he thought he should keep an eye on things, but then Kyonan said something to her. He grabbed him by the collar, and the old guy got so spooked he ran straight to His Majesty. The dude fell to his knees, saying he never imagined things would go south so fast. The emperor asked his son, cold as ice, if he was still gonna deny it. Kyonan tried to tell the emperor that she was definitely talking about him, like nobody's allowed to disrespect the prince. How could some girl born to a court lady talk trash to him? The emperor roared, demanding to know who told him that. He ordered Yongbin to answer for her son, right now. The woman, voice trembling, said the prince probably just overheard some court ladies gossiping. The emperor thought Yongbin was raising Kyonan right, but judging by today, doesn't look like it. The concubine has really let His Majesty down. After that whole mess, Songbin finally snagged the empress title. From now on, Xia, you gotta call your brother Yongwan, not Kyungwan. Since Songbin's the empress now, Kyungwan will be addressed as Grand Master. Either way, the third prince was definitely breathing easier. He asked his sister if she finally understood the kind of danger she was in that day. None of the servants could find her, and it's a good thing her brother assigned someone to watch over her, otherwise she would have been in a real pickle. Xia finally got it. She'd been wondering how those two found her. It's kinda nice knowing someone's got your back, though. After Songbin took the throne, things got pretty hectic around the palace for a while. Looks like the third prince's mom decided to try and make the most of the situation. They started firing a lot of the maids, and one day the main character spotted a familiar face. It was the same servant girl who'd saved her life, not once, but twice. The main character immediately ran over to her rescuer. She confidently told the court ladies that this girl wasn't bad and had saved her a couple of times already. The servant couldn't believe that her mistress remembered her, but Xia could never forget her kindness. Still, she never imagined her actions would have such big repercussions. Subin found out that Kyonan had been making threats against the little lady even before, but Yun had stayed quiet for some reason. Xia's mom revealed that she had a younger sister living outside the palace, and Kyonan started going after her. Yun was just worried about her sister, which is why she couldn't say anything to Her Majesty. The main character just remembered reading a book with a plot kind of like this. In the novel, a court lady was just a minor character, and all she wanted was payback on the prince who offed her sister. Xia really dug that novel, but she totally blanked on the court lady's name. The empress asked the maid what her name was, and the girl said it was Joga. The main character froze right there because that was the name. She couldn't figure out why she had the exact same name. Xia couldn't wrap her head around it, so she figured it had to be a coincidence. Although the more she thinks about it, the more the characters from that old novel remind her of people here. But there's no way someone could actually end up inside a novel. It was a court romance thing, and the main guy was named Li Hua, whose life and rise to the throne was the whole story. Choga-ai really stood out, sharpening her knife, hungry for revenge for her little sister. After gathering the evidence she needed, she lured the prince to her sister's grave and stuck a knife right in his back. It was a total power move, a righteous payback, and the high point of the whole story. That's exactly how the main dude managed to snag the title of Crown Prince. Our girl had been a massive fan of this story since it dropped, and was dying to see that scene play out in the show. She was rushing home to finish reading the script she'd been given when a car slammed into her as she ran into the street. Out of nowhere, the Crown Prince asked why their Xia was looking so serious. Youngwon snapped, all annoyed, asking how she could act so casual in the Crown Prince's presence. But the heir told Xia not to get so worked up. Even if he says stuff like that, the great Prince Youngwon actually cares about her. The main character had definitely heard that kind of talk somewhere before. So she asked the third prince what his name was. She already knew that Prince Yongwon had another name. Guess someone spilled the beans. The main character's eyes went wide as soon as she found out her brother's real name was Li Hua. The Crown Prince chuckled softly and said his brother's name was Beautiful, and the Crown Prince himself is called Li Hei. In other words, the main character of the story is standing right in front of Xia, which is totally mind-blowing. So it's not reincarnation, but more like getting sucked into a book. Even if Xia ended up in someone else's body, she already kicked the bucket in her past life and doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of going back. A few years passed, and now Grand Prince Yongwon turned 12. The Crown Prince was already 20 years old. One hot day, the heroes were chilling in the gazebo, and Xia was telling them a scary story. She was so convincing that the third prince immediately bought into it. Li Hua even squealed from all the excitement. He couldn't figure out how his little sister wasn't scared, since she's only 6 years old right now. The third prince turned red as soon as the main character said he just didn't have enough guts. It was scorching outside, but reputation is everything, so Xia couldn't even roll up her sleeves on her dress. Li Hua couldn't understand how she could act like that in front of the crown prince. The crown prince picked up the little one and chuckled, saying that's the privilege of being the youngest. It's been 4 years since the main character realized she was stuck in a book, and she's totally used to this life now. So the third prince was asking the crown prince if he's been totally glued to Xia lately. Li He said that once she gets a little older, they won't be able to be this close. If we're going by the original story, Grand Prince Li Hua's supposed to become the crown prince. But someone else has that title now, so the main character's totally lost about what's going on. Xia decided to rethink the original story, just to be sure. For some reason, she even vaguely remembers the title Grand Prince Yongwan and the villainous Prince Kaianon, who couldn't accept his younger brother. The reason Grand Prince Yongwan was able to become the heir was because the previous crown prince died, and the one who did that to Li He was Yongbin. But even after all that, she didn't become queen. Instead, it was Songbin, who Yongbin also tried to, well, you know. But all her efforts were for nothing, because the king chose a different concubine to be the empress. So, in the end, Yongbin just did everyone else a favor. In the novel, Kaianon and his mom were like the ultimate final bosses, but now they're just pathetic scraps of trash. And Xia's the one who brought them down. Because of her, the whole story's already changed so much. Yongbin's been grounded for life, and she and Prince Kaianon are locked up. The head advisor resigned, feeling guilty he didn't raise her right. Thanks to all that, the country had a few years of peace. Except the crown princess, who got married recently, kicked the bucket a few years later. Ever since Li He got all quiet, everyone's been worried, but then he started sneaking out of the palace. The third prince started teaching his sister how to write and read Chinese characters, but Xia wasn't having it. Honestly, studying isn't so bad, she just doesn't know how hard she needs to grind. A servant approached the crown prince and told him it was time to roll out. Li He set his sister down and explained he had to get going, time to clock in. The third prince thought it was hilarious that Xia was still acting all innocent around the crown prince. The main character exclaimed that made them even and bolted. Yongbin followed her annoyed and asked if she couldn't show a little class. They managed to ditch the servants in the end. The main character found out her brother had been hitting the books hard lately. Li Hua didn't know where that rumor came from, and the little one said there are no secrets in the palace. Xia figured it was all because of Her Majesty. The prince backed her up. 'Cause when he said he wanted to get into martial arts, Mom wasn't exactly thrilled. Looks like the Empress is worried that Prince Yongwan might be seen as a threat to the Crown Prince's position. Also, our girl found out they're gonna be picking a Crown Princess soon. To keep Mom from stressing, the third prince decided to lay low and focus on his studies for now. Time went by and our main character started getting seriously bored. When the lady was feeling down, Chogai suggested they play some kind of game. Being born into the royal family is cool and all, but compared to her old life, there's not a whole lot to do around here. Xia decided to bring some sweets to her dad and brother, 'cause they'd definitely be happy about that. The main character had an idea and she was ready to make it happen. So she suggested the maid go to the pastry shop, where they make all kinds of desserts, including sweets and chilled treats. And that's how Xia's dessert adventure began. After a little while, the silky smooth pudding was finally ready. She messed it up a bunch of times with the heat, but she finally nailed it exactly how she wanted. Consort Yun tasted the dessert and admitted she never would have thought that combo of stuff could taste so good. Xia said she didn't even know how many times she tried to get it that perfect texture, and as soon as she did, she ran straight to her mom. She froze when she saw her mom's expression change. The woman covered her mouth, her eyes getting all wide and worried. But the next second, a smile popped onto the consort's face, and she told her daughter that everything was totally okay. The eggs gave the dessert a bit of a weird, raw taste, so the consort suggested her daughter add a little fruit syrup. Back when Yun was living in the ladies' quarters, she'd secretly bake sweets and share them with her friends. Growing up, sweets were just a dream for her, so she'd sneak treats from the women's quarters. She had no real family and bounced around relatives' houses until she landed in the palace service. She lost touch with her relatives pretty quick, but she still had one close friend, closer than family. When her relatives were short on food, she secretly shared her rations with Yun, even if it meant going hungry herself. Once her friend promised to grow up, make money, and come back to feed her until she was stuffed, but then she vanished. Later, Yun also ended up in the palace as a maid, never having fulfilled her promise to meet up with her. One time, a guy showed up at the palace pretending to be her cousin. Shia wondered if there was something going on between them, a little spark maybe. Yun strictly forbade the young lady from ever mentioning it. The main character wondered, back when Yun was still a palace lady, if someone was pretending to be family and coming to the palace. Shia was totally stoked to see her older brother. He and his buddy greeted the young lady with respect. The main character explained to the crown prince that she'd whipped up something tasty and wanted to take it to the empress. Li Hei got curious about what she'd made too. Shia promised to treat him next time, and the prince nodded, mentioning he was heading to archery practice. The crown prince promised to teach his sister too once she was a little older. The main character was happy and said that starting to learn a skill from childhood wasn't a bad idea at all. Li Hai was supposed to go archery with Grand Prince Yongwan, but it turned out he couldn't make it today. As soon as the main character stepped into the palace, she immediately heard the empress and the third prince going at it. Shia realized she'd picked the absolute worst time to show up. She was about to leave when suddenly the third prince bolted out of his mother's office. Without a word, he just took off. The main character entered the empress's office and greeted her highness. The empress was pleased and invited the young lady to come in. Shia offered the woman her dessert, and the empress immediately appreciated its delicate sweetness. The main character explained that she was planning to learn gradually, to keep things safe. The empress knew that the princess was also still learning to write. Shia confirmed this, and added that the crown prince had promised to teach her horseback riding and archery. Noticing the empress's strange reaction, the heroine asked if it was impossible. The empress hadn't allowed her own son to learn those things, so she couldn't just let the princess do it. She tried to explain it was dangerous, but the main girl just said she'd have tons of guards around the crown prince. So Shia decided to ask Her Majesty if the awesome Prince Yongwan could study too. Li Hua was chilling by the pond when the main girl tracked him down. He knew for sure his sister had heard everything. Ever since Mom became Empress, the prince felt like she'd gotten distant. Since Shia managed to get Her Majesty's okay, she suggested her brother go learn archery and horseback riding. Li Hua was totally clueless how Shia pulled that off. The main girl just grinned and said that's the power of persuasion. The crown prince told his sister to quit goofing off and focus on her horse. Shia wasn't scared at all because there was no way she'd lose to Prince Yongwan, who was clearly freaking out. Li Hua just yelled out that he's not afraid of anything. Good thing he didn't become crown prince, because there's no way he could run a country with a personality that uncomplicated. And that naive kid in the novel becomes so cold and detached later on. Goes to show you, environment is everything. But now, the Grand Prince has no chance to meet the novel's main girl. She's supposed to bump into Li Hua by chance when she arrives at the palace, introduce herself to the Empress as a potential princess. But right now that girl is way too young. Shia wondered if it was because of her that the main hero and heroine wouldn't meet. Though maybe it's even better if they don't. They'll live a life without all the drama and turmoil. After their lesson, the Crown Prince escorted the princess. The main girl was worried that the heir had time for this kind of thing, especially with all the servants following them so nervously. The heroine's starting to get the feeling her older brother thinks their games are just a day off. Still, she enjoys hanging out with him too. After the punishment order came down, Yongbin and Gyeonggon were locked up, and sometimes they'd start screaming like they were losing it. The Crown Prince decided to go check on them. But the main character still wasn't about to go see people she didn't like. Li Hei, as Crown Prince, has to do things even if he doesn't want to, but she is free to choose. The main character heard the screaming again. The Crown Prince covered her ears so the little one wouldn't hear anything. Once the sound stopped, Li Hei told his sister to eat well, only see good things, and think positive thoughts. And then he went to visit his brother. Since Li Hei's related to them on his mom's side, he's got to check in on them and see how they're doing every now and then. A little later, Shia found out she was going to have a little brother or sister. That's why when Mom first tried that pudding, something felt off. Turns out it was morning sickness. The main character was curious, was it going to be a girl or a boy? Maybe he'll be born looking exactly like the main character's little brother, Yoon Shi-woon. Shia decided to congratulate her mother personally. The maids asked the lady how it went, since Her Highness was probably super happy. The main character confirmed that's how it went down. But Shia noticed something was up with Beck, because she looked kinda out of it. Turns out the maid just didn't get why the people in the Crown Prince's palace were such jerks. The prince's personal maid told her to keep smiling. The main character rolled her eyes, because the Eastern Palace folks didn't like her either, and even now they were giving her the stink eye. How'd it come to this? Where they're even messing with her servants? Of course, Shia couldn't just stand by and watch, since a pretty good idea popped into his head. The heroine offered the Crown Prince a dessert that the Queen had gifted her last time. Liha got curious, wondering if she'd already offered this to his father. She said no, which meant the Crown Prince got to try the dish way before his dad. The main character explained that the dish needed more thorough testing. The Crown Prince asked if his father wouldn't be upset. Unexpectedly, the princess revealed that a lot of people say she acts a little too free and easy. The Crown Prince furrowed his brow, asking in a serious tone if Sangoon had said something to her. Shia expected this, but didn't think the prince would get so worked up. Now, Li He was starting to question if he even deserved to be the Crown Prince. But that wasn't the whole story. The prince definitely wasn't like this before, so the main character couldn't figure out why he suddenly started thinking so negatively. She jumped up, asking if something happened again yesterday after his meeting with the second prince. Li He didn't answer, but she knew how exhausted he was. The Crown Prince immediately pulled the main character into a hug. Soon, he'd have to take a princess as his wife. It's been so long since his mother passed, but he still didn't want to bring another woman into the house. If she hadn't become the Crown Princess, maybe she wouldn't have stressed so much and left us so soon. Shia asked her brother if he wanted to get her a gift. Dad still keeps the ring he gave the princess back when he was the Crown Prince. The main character revealed that he bought it while he was out and about with the common folk. Li He asked with a warm smile why their Shia was so clever, and she answered that she was just born this way. The Crown Prince told his sister to let him know right away if her future husband ever acts out of line. But Shia replied that if she doesn't like her husband, she'll just live on her own. But Li He didn't get how you could live alone if you have a husband. The main character explained that when a husband passes away, the princess is free to live alone. That sounded like she was about to do something to her husband. The novel said that after the little princesses died, the emperor was devastated and couldn't have any more kids. But now, besides Shia, another baby is on the way. The prince reminded his sister that they were both members of the imperial family, but Shia decided if she didn't want to get married, she'd just ditch to another island with the cash the day before the wedding. Li He told his sister to just let him know if she ever, liked someone. Crossing her arms, the girl said she'd think about it. So the seasons passed and time flowed peacefully. But one day the Empress really laid into her. The main character told the maids she was fine, but still asked them not to tell her mother anything. Honestly, Shia was ready to take the heat for this, so no regrets. She told the Empress that the great prince always works his butt off, so maybe she could cut him some slack. After that, Songbin grabbed the whip, but Mom didn't seem as pissed as she was acting. She even ended up crying and apologizing. Sounds like she usually takes it out on her actual son. Right now, our girl's in the Gong ward, but the Crown Prince and the third prince still came to see her. All worried, Li He asked his sister if she was okay. He was sure Shia got punished because of her screw-up of a brother. The Crown Prince wouldn't just show up at the palace unannounced, which means the Empress knew he was coming, so she chewed out our girl on purpose. It was all a show, designed to prove she wasn't trying to steal the heir's spot. The Crown Prince definitely heard everything. Even the main character agreed the Empress went a little too far this time, but not on her own damn son. Li Hua hadn't said a word from the start, but Shia was sure he felt terrible. Originally, officials and non-heir princes were supposed to study culture to keep up appearances. But they're supposed to live by the motto that they're pure and free, and have zero interest in power or the crown. But since the Crown Prince treated Yongwon well, he followed his older brother in studies and martial arts. And the problem is, he's better than the heir at everything. The Grand Prince is still way younger than the Crown Prince, so direct comparisons are kinda out of line. Out of nowhere, Li He announced he was a total screw-up, and it'd be better for the country if someone outstanding became Crown Prince. But if we swap out the prince, the elders are gonna start a full-blown war. Talent or no talent, there's no guarantee he's the only one who can handle things. This whole thing might not even lead to anything worthwhile. Li Hei gets to thinking sometimes, but Xia says stuff a kid shouldn't even know. Guess he doesn't need to worry about her. The Crown Prince mentioned the upcoming war games, which is why he's planning to leave the palace for a bit. They used to hold them in the spring, but lately it's been happening in winter. That's when the wild animals get desperate and start coming right up to people's houses looking for food. The main character's thinking the Crown Prince on a hunting trip is just wrong. Her brother's more of a brush and books kind of guy, so Xia doesn't get why they'd send such a pretty face out hunting. Out of the blue, Li Hei asked his sister to make him that rice cake one more time before he leaves. It's a new snack created for Consort Yun, who's got morning sickness and can't keep anything down. It's lighter than regular rice cake, so pregnant women are really into it. The main girl promised to whip some up for him tomorrow. Turns out word got around about the cake, and now everyone wants a piece. Xia gave her brother a suspicious look and asked if he was planning on giving the leftovers to other people. He looked at the heroine with pleading eyes and asked if he really couldn't share. But the main girl was more interested in whether her brother was planning on giving this snack to the second prince. Li Hei confessed that he's really worried because his personality is getting rougher around the edges every day. Xia finally replied that she'd think about his request. "All right, if my brother promises to keep his paws off the whole damn thing, then fine, I'll do it." Li Hua started getting pissed, and the Crown Prince figured his brother just wanted a piece of the action too. Whenever the main character talked to the baby, it'd go wild. We don't know if it's a princess or a prince yet, but that kid's got some serious energy. Xia asked her mom if she was okay, and her mom said she was fine, nothing to worry about. The main character reminded her mom the roads were slick in the winter and told her to be careful when she goes out. Yeon Seong-oh walked up to the Crown Prince and asked if he was all right. The Crown Prince splashed some cold water on his face, said it was nothing, and told him not to sweat it. Then, he pulled an arrow out of a wounded crow. It would have been easier if it had just gone down from the first shot. A massive tiger strolled out of the thick woods, taking its sweet time. Everyone froze, seeing the predatory beast. The Crown Prince hastily mounted his horse and told his men they needed to hurry and get back immediately. They didn't even have a trap prepared for the tiger. Li Hua and his teacher noticed that Her Highness had decided to drop in on their lesson again. Today, the main character brought a little something with her. She handed her creation to the instructor, saying he could take it and share it with his wife and kids. Xia had her own reason for showing up during Grand Prince Yongwon's studies. The main character was using his class as an excuse to figure out how this world works. But Li Hua just couldn't understand why she was sitting in on his lessons. This world's like the Joseon the main character knows, but different. Like some characters are missing. Maybe that's why Xia was so into studying history. Kids like the third prince, even when they're getting hassled, they still nail the material, no distractions. After class, the heroes went out to play. Li Hua was feeling himself, since his little sis wasn't quite up to his level yet. Seeing the maids whispering, the main character wondered why all the servants were gathered there. The court ladies jumped when the young miss suddenly demanded to know what was going on. Turns out, a messenger arrived from Gangwon-do with urgent news, and he hurried off. The third prince figured that if it's urgent, it must be a pretty big deal. The main character wondered what could have happened that was so important they sent a messenger all the way from Gangwon-do. This could be something even the king can't handle. Xia grabbed her brother's arm, saying they needed to see the Empress ASAP. The princess looked at her brother, horrified, when he said they were about to break protocol big time. Li Hua was taken aback when his sister yelled that they needed to hurry. The little one threw the door open first. The officials started getting upset because they were told to let no one in during the meeting with the Empress. The third prince apologized to the Empress, saying he hadn't been able to properly look after his sister. He was about to leave, but Her Majesty asked him to stay. Grand Prince Yongwon and Xia need to hear this news. Soon everyone knew the Crown Prince had passed away tragically after a run-in with a wild animal. The main character couldn't believe it. Her brother promised he'd be back. Before he left home, the Crown Prince asked his sister to look after something for him. It was that ring the princess mentioned before, the one the Crown Prince got from their father. Li Hei figured if he took it to military exercises, he'd definitely lose it. As soon as he got back, the prince promised his beloved little sister he'd bring her something way better than that. So everything he said was a lie. A month passed after that. The prince's funeral went on, and Xia cried herself to exhaustion every day, falling asleep in tears. But one day she finally came out of her room. The princess asked the court ladies if they knew where the senior officer was right now. They said he was completely healthy, but you couldn't trust those rumors either. Yosiano took a hit to the eye. The guy immediately jumped out of bed, even though Her Highness told him to stay put. The main character decided to get the real story from the senior officer, since everyone else clammed up. She still hasn't even seen her brother's body, and no one's told her anything about what happened to him in his final moments. It's messed up that she has to piece together what happened based on gossip. The Crown Prince always told his attendant that the lady's stubbornness was unbeatable, and he was right. It all went down when they suddenly got caught in a heavy snowfall and rushed back. Because they sped up, the horse slipped on the icy road and the prince bit the dust. Luckily, he wasn't seriously hurt and was about to get back on his horse, but then, like a tiger, he appeared, as if waiting for the perfect moment. So Yong Sun-oh ushered the Crown Prince ahead and stayed behind to fight the tiger himself. The predator was old and moved slow, so the man managed to deal a fatal blow with just his bow. The hero thought he'd gotten lucky. That is, until he found those who'd gone ahead all messed up. There was another tiger. Yong Sun-oh immediately charged, figuring the beast had brutally mauled His Highness, the Crown Prince. He managed to wound the second tiger, but it swatted him away. Yong Sun-oh got knocked out and fell, and when he came to, he saw the tiger's fangs right in front of him, and that's when the guy thought it was all over. But suddenly, the predator arched its back and roared like it was dying. Turns out, the Crown Prince, who Yong Sun-oh thought was dead, was standing off to the side with a drawn bow. In other words, the bonehead Crown Prince risked his life to save his warrior. When Yong Sun-oh opened his eyes again, he realized he was definitely the only survivor left. Gathering his last bit of strength, he followed the tiger's tracks and saw it wounded and breathing heavily among the scattered bodies. That's how Yong Sun-oh ended the tiger's life, using his dead comrade's sword. After that, soldiers found the man, gave him first aid, and then, using the remaining belongings and clothes, they started identifying the body. The Crown Prince was holding a painting of the great prince and princess in his hands. Li Hei was always like that, thinking about others instead of himself. But that's what the main character loved about him. Even though Xia was resentful, she couldn't punish Yong Sun-oh, because then the Crown Prince's death would be for nothing. The main character headed for the exit and asked the senior officer not to escort her, but Yong Sun-oh wouldn't have it. He insisted on walking the princess out. On the way back, Bayek gave one of the maids a suspicious look. Then, the lady-in-waiting explained to the princess that she thought she saw a familiar face. The servant mentioned that visits to the medical facility have been happening more often lately. When Yongbin found out about the Crown Prince, she started crying, saying she wanted to repay his kindness and say goodbye one last time. Except when she was alive, she treated him terribly and said some awful things. Yong Sun-oh told the princess about his plans to resign and leave his position. Xia's eyes widened, and she asked the man if that wasn't what the Crown Prince wanted all along. But the man served His Highness for years, and now he can't, and doesn't have the right to, serve a new master. Xia heard he risked his life and fought tooth and nail to become a senior officer. Out of nowhere, Yong Sun-oh told the princess that the Crown Prince was really looking forward to her growing up. He asked her to take care of herself, and she asked him to do the same. Then they said their goodbyes. Officially, the Crown Prince's death was announced as an accident, a fall from his horse, but rumors were flying. Just recently, the gossipy maids were whispering about someone getting eaten by a tiger or that they heard weird noises. Beck told her, whatever she did, not to answer if she heard a voice calling her name. It means whoever got taken by that tiger gets turned into a servant, bringing it more prey. She spun around when a voice called her name, demanding to know who was there. A massive tiger stepped out of the shadows. The court ladies grabbed the young princess and bolted, trying to get as far away from that beast as possible. The main character was totally lost. What the heck was going on? Are there really ghosts in this world? Seriously? The maid carrying the princess didn't see a rock in the dark and tripped over it. She lost her balance and went down hard. Right above her, the main character saw the paw of a huge beast, and weirdly enough, a knife sticking out of it. But the tiger froze as soon as it heard the guards shouting. The massive predator turned and vanished into the darkness. Yon Song-oh came over with a medic to ask the princess if she was okay, and what all the screaming was about. Thank goodness those two showed up when they did. The main character felt a little bit better. Palace guards rushed towards the heroes in a heartbeat. The maids tried to explain what happened, but Shia told them all to shut it. The princess herself explained that a suspicious character attacked them and then bolted in the other direction. As soon as the servants left, Beck asked her mistress if they shouldn't report this to the palace guards immediately. But Shia replied that the voice was completely different and she couldn't mistake her own brother's voice. In all that chaos, she was the only one who saw it clearly. But that tiger's gait wasn't natural for him. He moved like there was a person inside. And most importantly, in the moonlight, the princess managed to notice something sparkling, and it didn't look like animal claws. So this is the work of a human. Weird coming from a kid, but the main character didn't have time to think about it right now. Everyone in the palace already knows the crown prince died in that tiger accident, so the rumors are only gonna get worse. Just then, Ami ran up to the princess. She urgently asked her lady to go see Her Royal Highness Consort Yun right away. Apparently, the consort is bleeding out. Ami grabbed the doctor by the hand and dragged him to the consort's chambers. Freaked out by everything, the main character asked the servant what happened to make her mother suddenly start bleeding. She was fine before she had dinner and drank her medicinal tea. But then, out of nowhere, a young man's voice called out to Consort Yun. The main character immediately asked if it was definitely a human voice, and the court lady confirmed it was. Then some freaky thing jumped out at the lady, and she got so spooked she fell, and that's when the bleeding started. Shia couldn't figure out who would dare pull something like that on her sister. Turns out, lately the lady's been saying her stomach felt like a rock. Maybe it was all the stress with the crown prince, 'cause she felt awful the whole ceremony. The medicine they gave her only made things worse, so Beck went to the royal infirmary a bunch of times. But they checked her out and said it was just stress. Her sister's voice had never sounded so beat up before. Labor started 3 months early, and if anything goes sideways, it's not just the kid. Her life's on the line too. The concubine kept screaming, and Shia couldn't take it anymore. But then all of a sudden the screaming started to fade away. The tears started pouring down the main character's face the second the healer started freaking out and calling for the mistress. The princess bolted up right away. She threw open the door and immediately saw the terrified maids, begging the mistress to open her eyes. Yun slowly lifted her eyelids and looked at Shia. The main character touched her hand, and the woman whispered that she was so glad she came to her. She was so happy to be near her only daughter in her final moments. The concubine's eyelids closed and her heartbeat stopped. The main character hugged her sister and screamed desperately, saying she didn't understand why things had to end this way. Her brother, her sister, why does everyone keep leaving her? In the end, the main character passed out again and woke up in her room because of a bunch of voices. The emperor's ordered a funeral for Consort Yun, but it's gotta be low-key. After that, the maids were whispering about how if it weren't for the kid, none of this would have happened. Most likely, in the original story, her sister wouldn't have died, but because of the main character, fate got twisted. The crown prince couldn't escape his destiny either, and ended up kicking the bucket. Maybe everything she's been doing is all for nothing. Opening her eyes, the first thing the main character saw was Beck and Ami. Shia sat up in bed and immediately asked how the mother's baby was doing. From the maid's reactions, she knew the little one didn't make it. Shia was so looking forward to taking care of the baby when it was born and dreamed of watching him grow up healthy. The main character started crying again, and Ami tried to comfort her. The maid said His Majesty himself came and took care of her personally for days before leaving. Turns out Yongbin and Kyungwon came by too, but the maid specifically kept them out so they wouldn't pull any crap. They brought the princess some herbal tea. Suddenly, our girl remembers that ever since the crown prince's funeral, her sister's been getting worse after drinking that tea. Back then, the Chwonyandan maids started getting into the royal infirmary, so the chances of this being a setup are pretty high. But the teas have already been destroyed, so there's no finding any proof now. Even if we somehow manage to do an autopsy, it'll be tough to prove there was poison inside. Maidbake told her lady to rest and not worry about things. But our girl hasn't eaten anything for days and has been lying flat, so she needs to start getting back on her feet. Shia had a ton of visitors these past few days. The Emperor and Empress, Grand Prince Yongwon, even the royal concubines sent people to check up on her. But out of everyone, there wasn't a single person she actually wanted to see. A few days went by, and only after the court physician said she was doing better was Shia allowed to leave the infirmary. The first place she went was the room she used to share with her sister. Everything was pretty much the same, but now it was missing someone. Her sister's tomb was outside the palace, so she couldn't even visit. Her eyes went wide when she heard her sister's voice calling her name. And then, right in front of her, Shia saw her, crying her eyes out and grieving the loss of someone close. Looking at the picture, she realized it was her own funeral. Shia got closer to her sister, and she suddenly grabbed her hand, saying with a bloody mouth that it wasn't fair. The main character shot up in bed, jolted awake from a nightmare. It's just a dream, but the tears are starting again. Why now, of all times, did she have that dream? Shia decided to get some air, threw on a cloak, and quietly slipped outside while the other maids were asleep. Because the guards were focused on protecting Great Prince Yanwu, Shia was able to get out without any trouble. Truthfully, she didn't even know why she came to Treongdan. But the main character froze as soon as a familiar voice asked someone if the deed was done. Shia immediately ducked down and hid, so no one would spot her. Just like the second prince ordered, one of Great Prince Yanwu's maids was taken care of. Now the court lady needs to slip something into Yangwan's food, but Kaianan didn't explain what it was. Just like the prince promised, as soon as he's out of here, the maid will become a concubine and won't be running errands anymore. In other words, Kaianan's trying to take care of Grand Prince Yangwan. I gotta tell the prince right away before they actually get to him. Seeing the maid rush out, the main character barely managed to hide and ended up going unnoticed. Once the coast is clear, Shia decided to follow her immediately. Suddenly, Kaianan asked someone to come out, then said they need to handle everything quietly. If it doesn't work and Yangwan doesn't go away, then let him live his whole life terrified of being taken care of. If Kaianan had just been put on the throne right away, he wouldn't have even resorted to so much trouble. His older brother's situation was just an opportunity for Kaianan, and only now is everything falling into place. He pretended to be a hero, framed his older brother as a monster, and then poisoned Shia to steal the throne. Some guy asked the prince why he let the princess live. But Kaianan was sure a pathetic creature like the princess couldn't stop him, and she'd be begging for mercy any minute now. Besides, her cooking's pretty decent. Now the main character understood why he kept her around. The great prince was super surprised when Shia found him. The main character ran into the room, overjoyed to see her brother alive. Yangwan took her hands in his and asked, worried, why she was so cold and barely dressed. Then the prince guessed his sister had a nightmare and ran here because she couldn't sleep alone. The main character lied and said that's exactly what happened. Yanwu gave a warm smile as soon as the princess asked if she could stay with him here all night. Shia settled down, and the prince mentioned he couldn't sleep, so he wanted to read a book. The main character noticed dried plums on her brother's desk, and Yanwu explained they were brought to him as a snack, but he didn't feel like having them. The princess asked to eat one, and Yanwu, of course, gave her permission. Turns out, the prince is hitting the books right now because without them, his mind starts wandering to dark places. Ever since that thing happened with his older brother, Yanwu wants to visit Shia more often and look after her. She was so thrilled when she found out she was getting a little brother, so now the prince is determined to take even better care of her. Suddenly a scene flashed in his mind, his sister asking for another plum, and when he turns around, he sees a specter, its mouth covered in, well, let's just say something really unpleasant. Yanwu couldn't figure out why he suddenly remembered that. Just to be safe, the great prince decided to turn around and check on Shia. The little girl's mouth was completely smeared with blood. She closed her eyes as the prince jumped up, grabbed her, and frantically yelled for a doctor. With her last bit of strength, Shia squeezed out that if anything happened, he had to become a good ruler. Yanwu's eyes widened and the main character lost consciousness. The great prince started wailing, clutching the precious person he loved to his chest, screaming her name. That night, the princess woke up her maids and told them to follow her to the great Prince Yanwu. She ordered them to absolutely catch the person she asked them to detain and not let them get away under any circumstances. After that, he needed to be brought to the inner courtyard immediately. If the ladies-in-waiting said it was the princess's order, Her Imperial Majesty the Empress would take care of everything else. Shia also told the girls not to worry about her. But now, she was lying exhausted in bed after swallowing the poison. Ami couldn't believe her lady actually went through with it. Some time passed, and now Ami was once again carrying food down the hallway, prepared for the princess. Entering the room, she found her lady fully conscious and looking much better. Tears welled up in Ami's eyes on their own. Soon the emperor rushed to Shia's side. He hugged his daughter tightly, for the first time in a long time, because he was incredibly relieved she was okay. The man didn't understand how she could put her father through such agony. Following His Majesty, the worried Empress rushed in as soon as she learned the princess had regained consciousness. The healers said it's a straight-up miracle the lady survived in that condition. Shia wanted to ask what happened after that day, but the vibe was so heavy she couldn't even open her mouth. Honestly scarier than when Dad's pissed. The silent great Prince Yongwon, just sitting there, not saying a damn word. He stayed even after the Emperor and Empress left, and then finally spoke, making Shia jump. You could see the worry and judgment in his eyes. He wanted to say something, but then changed his mind and told his sister to rest, even though she couldn't with him around. Turns out Yongwon's now the crown prince. Shia congratulated him, and that's when her brother snapped, saying it didn't mean anything, cause she was practically knocking on death's door the whole time. Yongwon asked if she even had a clue what he felt when he saw her coughing up blood, and now Shay's acting like nothing even happened. The main character hugged her brother and apologized, saying it was all her fault. Yongwon held her tight and cried for the first time in ages. Honestly, Shay didn't even think about him, even though the prince suffered just as much as she did. Yongbin pushed his sister back slightly and asked, outraged, if she knew those snacks were tainted. He clearly remembered that she apologized to him. Plus, she came to his chambers alone, without her ladies-in-waiting, who ended up grabbing the maid who brought the persimmons. Usually, Yongbin was a bit slow on the uptake, but suddenly he's insightful. After calming down, the prince said that no one, not even Shay, would deliberately ingest something like that, so he was just talking nonsense. The prince explained that he was thrown for a loop by the testimony of that very maid who brought the persimmons. This broad was playing dumb at first, saying she knew nothing, but with Shia practically kicking the bucket, we had to persuade her to talk. She finally cracked and admitted to spiking the medicine Prince Kenan gave, though she claimed she didn't know what it was. Turns out she was telling the truth, because they found poison stashed in the second prince's room, and the attempted poisoning wasn't the only dirt they dug up. Apparently they were putting the whammy on his brother back at the estate. Back then, curses weren't just some fairy tale, so you couldn't just brush them off. The old man hit the roof and was ready to have them all executed on the spot. But they were still mourning the older brother, and there'd been one tragedy after another. So Kenan got stripped of his title and banished. Right after him, all the officials in that weasel-left minister's inner circle got exiled too. That bummed out Shia, and then her brother dropped the bomb that they were being shipped off to different regions for forced resettlement. It's a punishment where the prisoners locked up so high, it's like no light can even get in. The only connection to the outside world was this tiny hole they'd pass food through. The main character's eyes went wide as her brother asked if she was okay. Shia gave him a warm smile and said she was fine. Soon spring arrived, birds were singing their hearts out, and warm sunshine and a fresh breeze greeted Shia. But much to her dismay, the main character felt absolutely no joy from having survived. The princess was informed that the crown prince was looking for her. Shortly after she regained her health, that title was officially bestowed upon our main character. If anything was unexpected, it was that the Emperor, Empress, and Crown Prince kept sending people to Shia. The main character wondered if her brother had only called her over for a snack. Just like she thought, Yanwu's treats weren't like anyone else's. The Crown Prince didn't get why his sister was growing so slowly, like she was deliberately skipping meals. Shia wasn't gaining the weight she needed to, and it was starting to worry Yanwu. According to the healer, the main character's body was weakened from some incident, but otherwise she's fine. Today, Shia heard that they were starting to choose a bride for the crown prince, and Yanwu flinched at those words. The prince really didn't want that. The main character exclaimed that it was the wisdom of the elders, aimed at the well-being of her older brother. If this little one keeps listening to nonsense, Yanwu might have to tell the princess's maids to keep their mouths shut. Out of the blue, the prince asked when she was planning to start studying, since he knew she had a talent for math. Look, Shia was just trying to make things easier for the crown prince, so she introduced Arabic numerals and statistical charts. The main character didn't want to answer the prince's question, so she bolted. She decided to take a walk because she was feeling a little lighter now. The princess stopped dead in her tracks when she suddenly heard a kid's voice. Turns out it was some kid she didn't know, and he told her she was super pretty. The main character walked closer to him and asked the little guy where he came from. The boy said he got here with his sister and aunt because his dad did something awesome in battle, and they were invited as a reward. Then the kid, all excited, asked the main character who she was, 'cause she was way too cute to be a servant. Shia awkwardly asked if there was some rule that said palace maids couldn't be beautiful. She decided to change the subject and asked her new friend if he shouldn't be looking for his family. The kid was stoked, saying since he'd already made it to the palace, he didn't want to leave right away. Besides, there were some seriously hot maids hanging around. The main character held out her hand to the boy and offered to show him around the imperial palace grounds a bit. The kid was totally blown away by how beautiful the palace was. The main character hadn't talked to someone so openly in ages, not counting the current crown prince. Suddenly, the new acquaintance's stomach let out a loud rumble. So, the kids went and grabbed some castella, which they'd snuck out of the bakery earlier. The main character told the boy that this egg and rice cake was all the rage right now. The little dude was freaking out over the flavor. As soon as they finished their snack, the main character decided to take her new friend back to the palace to be with his family. But suddenly, a huge black crow appeared over the princess's head. The boy immediately pulled Shia close, saving her from the bird's sudden attack. But it turned out the crow didn't actually mean to attack. He grabbed the bird with one hand and asked the girl if she was okay, which really surprised her. Turns out, a string was stuck on the crow's leg, which is why it couldn't fly away properly. The main character thanked the boy for catching the bird, saying she almost lost something really important to her. Ever since her older brother gave her that ring, Shia never took it off and always took good care of it. Hearing that, the boy squeezed the bird tighter and called it a real jerk. But the kids let the crow go, telling it to never come back near them again, or it would seriously regret it. Turning her head, Shia accidentally kissed the boy on the cheek. She immediately pulled back and started apologizing, saying it was totally an accident. The kid's face went bright red and he started stuttering. The little dude decided to hold his breath on purpose, and that's when our main character saw the kid's bleeding wound. A crow probably just got him, but it's not a huge deal, though the wound still needs to be cleaned up. There was nothing else around, so Shia gave him her scarf and bandaged up his arm. Actually, our main character was surprised by how brave this kid was, and he told her he got that from his dad. Thanks to his awesome fighting skills, his dad managed to become an army commander. A thought suddenly hit our main character, and she jumped to her feet. The boy was saying he came here with his sister, so Shia found out she's 14 years old, which is the same age as the crown prince, meaning she's a candidate to be Yongwon's wife. The main character grabbed the kid's hand and, without explaining anything, hauled him along. The crown prince straight up asked her if she'd be his bride. But she was totally not interested in becoming the crown prince's fiancé. Even from like 300 feet away, you could tell she was the main character of this story, so Shay couldn't look away. Truth is, this girl wanted to be a healer. Her mom was sick, but back then women's illnesses often didn't get the care they needed. That's why her mom passed away too soon, and it was a heavy weight on the main character's shoulders. She just knew the crown prince was gonna say a woman couldn't do that kind of thing. But surprisingly, Yongwon said if a noblewoman became a healer, it'd be way easier for women from other families. That was the first time she'd ever heard anyone say something like that. Maybe the crown prince started thinking this way because of his little sister. She is smart, but she can be unpredictable and a real handful. Yongwon gently touched the girl's hand and said softly that he really needed the crown princess right now. So he sweetly asked her to think about it one more time. Shia knew right away her brother was using his good looks as a weapon. Looks like the crown prince realized he needs to get hitched ASAP to lock things down. Sucheon couldn't take it anymore and ran out to his sister. His sister immediately asked him, all worked up, where he'd been because she couldn't find him anywhere. She didn't get how he got all those injuries and where he suddenly got a white cloth from. The crown prince was stunned when he saw Shia. The main character emerged from her hiding spot and awkwardly told the crown prince it was an accident. Sucheon's sister froze when she saw the princess. With a smile, the crown prince introduced his sister, Princess Shia. Sucheon's face showed surprise mixed with awe at who he'd been hanging out with this whole time. The girl immediately apologized to the princess, said her name was Kim Ji-hwa, and the boy introduced himself as Sucheon. Now that Kim Ji-hwa had found her little brother, she needed to leave, so she thanked the crown prince for his time. But she clearly didn't know the palace, so Yongwon couldn't just let her go alone and offered to escort her, which she accepted. After that whole dried persimmon incident, the prince was super wary of people, but now he was actually pretty engaged. Youngwon asked Kim Ji-hwa again to be his princess, but she politely said the strict rules of the castle weren't for her. She loves her freedom and enjoying festivals whenever she wants. Unlike her, the crown prince had never left the palace walls, and now it's become 10 times harder. But even so, he offered to personally show Kim Ji-hwa the Lantern Festival, which is happening real soon. The girl instantly blushed, totally surprised, but she agreed. The main character remembered one crucial thing that was mentioned in the novel. Yongbin, her adoptive father, planned to tear Ji-hwa's family apart, framing her for treason, all to get at the crown prince. Even though Ji-hwa managed to escape in the chaos, her whole family was captured, and it was written that they all perished in the end. After the incident with Yongbin and Prince Gyeonggon, Hong Sang-jo also stepped down, but we still can't let our guard down. What happened in the original story, it finally happened here too. Shia whispered to her new friend to definitely follow her sister if she goes anywhere on the 4th moon of April. The main character explained that she was planning to go too. That day came sooner than we thought, and our heroes finally headed out to the party they'd been waiting for. Meanwhile, the officials urged His Majesty to take action, saying this transgression was a real betrayal. The emperor ordered everyone involved to be locked up. Soo Cheon asked the princess if she liked dried persimmons, since people said they were super tasty. Shia sheepishly admitted she wasn't a fan, but she suggested they go get some honey cookies together instead. The crown prince smiled warmly, happy to see the kids having such a good time. On their way, the heroes stumbled across a shadow puppet show. Soo Cheon grabbed the princess's hand and pulled her along, wanting to check out the show together. The main character freaked out when some dude in a tiger mask just popped up right in front of her, frozen like a statue. Soo Cheon noticed the princess's weird reaction, so he suggested they head back, saying it wasn't as interesting as he thought. Stepping aside, the kid promised the main girl he'd always protect her from any danger. Shia smiled and said she'd be counting on him. The crown prince bought some lanterns and suggested they go up on the fortress wall and launch them together. The main character said she was tired and wanted to chill for a bit, and Soo Cheon agreed. Truth was, Shia knew her brother came here to hang with Ji-hwa, not babysit her. In the original story, that girl makes it out okay, so no sweat, Youngwon's got her back. Soon, the princess and her friend arrived at the house Ji-hwa rents every year for the Lantern Festival. Looks like we can finally breathe easy, huh? Honestly, the main girl was freaking out, but they were having a blast until their feet were killing them. But that's still way better than if things had stayed the same by the end of the Lantern Festival. Shia couldn't have stopped natural disasters like that tiger attack, but maybe they've finally turned a corner now. In the distance, our heroes heard the sound of fireworks. Word is the students launch boats on the Han River and put on a fire show. So, Soo Cheon suggested he and the princess go together later, and she promised she would. Suddenly, a servant came running with some terrible news. Turns out her lord father is being accused of treason. Soo Cheon shot up, his voice shaking, saying there's no way, his father would never do that. The main character couldn't figure out why this was happening, since Hong Sang-jo no longer had any reason to do it. Soo Cheon yelled that he wasn't running until he checked everything one more time, but Shia clocked him over the head hard. Then she screamed that he needed to snap out of it, ASAP, because his life was on the line. Shia asked one of the servants his name and found out it was Dok Chil. The princess ordered him to get up on the wall right now and send a message, since he knew best where the mistress might have gone. The main character suggested it'd be better to go out through the south gate, take the ferry across the Han River, and go around the city. So she told Dok Chil to hurry up and tell them to meet at the ferry crossing. Then Shia asked her court ladies if they had grabbed outer garments, and immediately got a yes. Soo Cheon flinched when the princess told him to strip down. So they ended up dressing him as a girl. Right now, the guards are probably grabbing every boy they see and checking them out, so changing his appearance is super important. Beck decided to put the guy's hair up. Actually, the main character thought the maids would try to stop her. But Baek, with a warm smile, replied that no matter what, they would just obediently follow their mistress. It was obvious that if they got caught, a lot of people would be in deep trouble. Then, the main character handed Soo Cheon the sweets she had brought, and asked him to tell everyone he was the daughter of a noble family, out for a stroll with her maid. Shia also took out some jewelry and gave it to her friend so he could sell it later and not starve. On top of that, the main character advised Soo Cheon not to trust his servants completely. Seeing the sadness on the kid's face, she promised to escort him to the south gate. Out of nowhere, Soo-cheon asked the main girl why she was being so nice to him. Shia explained that he was just a kid and hadn't done anything wrong. Being the son of a traitor sucks, but right now the most important thing is to get away. We can figure out the rest later. Calming down, Soo-cheon agreed with the princess's words. The main girl decided to double-check with her friend if he really knew how to ride a horse. That's exactly what the servant, Dokchil, managed to overhear while hiding. Soon, a horse with a rider on its back approached the gate. The guard didn't react at all, just wondered how much that silk dress was worth. Suddenly, Dokchil ran forward and shouted that this kid in the skirt on the horse was actually the fugitive son of a, well, you know. The guards were starting to doubt the intel was legit. So, Dokchil, trying to prove it, ran up to the rider and ripped off the silk cloth, hoping to get a break. But under the cloak was the princess, and she just glared at the traitor with pure contempt. She smacked his hand and yelled, asking how he even dared to touch her. Since he claims she's the child of a traitor, he better be ready to answer for those accusations. The guards decided to let the lady go, but Dokchil couldn't let that happen, so he grabbed the horse's tail. But the dude totally wasn't expecting the animal to kick him with its hind legs. Suddenly, the horse reared up and bolted, scaring the crap out of our main girl. Ami slapped Dokchil across the face, called him a scumbag, and screamed that if anything happened to the lady, he was a dead man. Just then, Soo-cheon was being carried away unnoticed on someone's back. He totally freaked out too when he saw the horse bolt with the princess. Soo-cheon remembered how Princess Shia hugged him tight and promised everything would be all right. The kid vowed he'd survive no matter what and repay the princess. After running deep into the woods, the horse finally stopped, and our girl gave her a pat. Who would have thought that idiot would get so close and set off Chaka? A little earlier, our girl explained she'd ride Sok to distract them, while the servant carried Soo-cheon out. Bike would grab the horse Ami brought, take it to the west gate, hand it off, and slip away quietly. But Ami asked her to wait and offered the princess different clothes, since what she was wearing could be dangerous. That servant Dokchil just saw the blue clothes and went straight after her. If it wasn't for Ami, things could have gone south real fast. Jihwa probably didn't hear about meeting at the docks now, so Shia had no idea if she'd be okay. The crown prince probably helped her escape somehow. But here's the real question. Who framed Jihwa's family with that conspiracy charge? Originally, during the conspiracy investigation involving other groups, Hong Sang-jo saw an opportunity. He tried to drag Kim Sun-ik, the governor of Hamgyong province, into the plot, but he failed. But Kyunggon and Hong Sang-jo are already gone, so someone else is behind this, or they still have pull. I shouldn't worry about that today, though, because the heroine did everything she could. At least she saved the ones she could. Suddenly, 3 guys appeared in front of her, telling her they knew her parents well. That was total BS, and Shia saw right through it. The heroine told the thugs that her mom died years ago, and she doesn't have any relatives because she's an orphan. So the thug asked her to share her money or valuables, saying they knew her mom back in the day. But Shia apologized and said she'd already given all her cash to someone else. The guys got bummed, clearly realizing some weirdo had scammed the kid. Then the thug pointed at the horse and said that would work too. But the main character explained it was the last thing her late brother left her, 'cause he rescued the poor thing. The bandits were taken aback by the little girl's hard luck story. Tears welled up in Shia's eyes, and the guys immediately tried to explain they were just trying to make a little scratch. They decided to leave the horse alone, but then asked the kid to give up her clothes. The main character immediately shouted, asking if they were some kind of creeps. A quiet chuckle came from nearby. A guy steps out of the shadows, says things didn't seem that dangerous, so he was just gonna stroll on by. But bullying a young lady to tears? That's just not cool. The gang leader was stoked, 'cause he figured he could handle a grown man way different than a little girl. But this stranger took him out with one punch. The main girl was totally lost, wondering where this master came from. Once her savior had dealt with everyone, he asked her if she was headed toward the south gate. The stranger said he'd go ahead and told her to keep her distance and follow him. The main girl gave him a warm smile and thanked him for the help. Before long, they got to where they needed to be. Since the young lady's escorts were already waiting for her, her savior decided to take his leave. The main character thanked him, finally getting a decent look at his face. The guy took off, and the main character explained to Beck that this man had escorted her here. The crown prince felt a wave of relief seeing his sister was back safe and sound. He hopped onto her horse right away. Yongwon said some servant came to them and told Jiwa to run, so those two are probably outside the capital by now. Even without knowing the full story, the prince helped them get away. A warm smile spread across Yongwon's face as the princess told him he did the right thing. That day, Xia forgot about the thing that mattered most. She couldn't find the ring her dead brother had given her. Xia, scared but hopeful, asked Guy if she'd seen the ring last night when she was changing her clothes. The maid remembered the jewelry her mistress always wore. So, flustered, she replied that she hadn't seen it. Xia felt panic rising inside her, so she asked about the clothes she'd worn out yesterday. Guy stood up and promised the young mistress to wait a moment. She'd bring them right away. Xia had fallen asleep right away yesterday and hadn't even checked. Crown Prince Songwon's ring had to be either in the clothes or in the bundle with her things. But there was nothing there. The main character started frantically thinking about where she could have lost it. Maybe the string around her neck came undone while they were wandering around the market. If so, there's a good chance she dropped it when she changed in that house, but she can't go outside right now. Yesterday, that servant Dokchil might have mentioned that she wasn't alone, but with a young master and his people. If Xia goes back to that house and something happens, it'll spell trouble not just for her, but for Ami and Gai too. "What about that servant?" the girl asked suddenly. The maid's face turned grim, and she told the young lady not to worry. "He won't be talking to anyone, ever." The main character froze, not understanding why Gahi said it so creepily. She started hoping the guy wasn't, gone. The maid tensed up when the princess suddenly got to her feet, clearly about to head somewhere. The main character explained she just wanted to check on Chaka. Xia knew he might be worn out, but she wanted to make sure the loyal horse wasn't spooked after yesterday. So the princess suggested to the maid that she'd just pop in and be right back. But things didn't exactly go the way the main character planned. In the stables, she spotted two men, one of whom, Yeon Seon, said the late crown prince had wanted to gift the stallion to the princess. "Too bad, that's one hell of a horse," the guy replied. The lead girl was totally stunned, not understanding who this dude was or why he was suddenly giving her grief. Yong Sun Oh suggested the guy back off, saying the horse had a special temperament, only recognized its owner, and didn't take kindly to strangers. Unable to hold back, Gayi asked, annoyed, why they were staring at the princess's horse with such disrespect. The men immediately bowed, but the handmaiden reminded her they still hadn't answered her question. Realizing his mistake, Yong Suno introduced his old friend, Song Amuge, who would soon become a royal guard. The lead girl figured out the guy was just showing this dude around the palace. But she warned that if Yong Suno kept letting outsiders in so easily, he'd be held accountable later on. Song Amuge immediately said the horse was magnificent, impossible to look away from. For some weird reason, the lead girl thought the guy's voice sounded familiar, but she decided not to dwell on it. Instead, Xia greeted Chake with obvious delight. Son Amuge flinched when the princess spoke the noble steed's name. He immediately shot a surprised look at Her Highness. Isn't the horse's name written with the characters Crimson Raven, or is the princess using the character Child in Chake's name? Just as the main character suspected, that voice was familiar for a reason. This guy's the same dude from last night who nobly saved her bacon. But the main character can't let on. Not with so many ears around here. Xia turned decisively and announced she needed to take Chake for a spin. And she whispered to Ami to stall that guard for a bit so he couldn't follow them. Soon, the main character, mounted on the horse, headed out into the street. Ga told the future royal guard, point blank, to not cause any trouble. Xia kept telling herself she heard nothing. It wasn't her business, even though she felt super awkward. Probably that scribe who helped sneak Chake out yesterday for cash is deaf too. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the palace administration building, and it was getting closer. "Get those lowlifes!" the heroes suddenly heard, spotting guards chasing after some rule breakers. Right away, Son Amuge politely asked the princess to step aside. The main character was totally lost, not understanding why these people were headed their way. Are they trying to steal a horse and bolt? If they're acting this crazy, are they tied to some plot? Son Amuge stepped forward and announced it was the princess's horse, and if they didn't back off, he'd be forced to use force. The dude cursed in frustration and told the obstacle to get lost, swinging his arm at the same time. The future royal guard knew his opponent wasn't backing down, and his face turned stone cold. He dodged the blow with a slick duck. That threw his opponent for a loop. Then, Sun Amuge landed a haymaker to the jaw, shutting down any chance of a follow-up. The guy went down hard, out cold. Meanwhile, his buddy had already sprinted to the horse, shoving the maid aside and yelling at her to get lost. Sun Amuge spun around, realizing he'd screwed up. By then, the troublemaker had already hopped on the horse. But Chake wasn't sweating it, which made the guy freak out and yell, "What's happening?" The second the horse reared up, our hero's fingers let go of the reins. The dude went flying right towards the main character. Time seemed to freeze. Shia knew she had to move, but her body just wouldn't respond. Gayi, the maid, looked absolutely terrified. All the main character could do was throw her hands up, hoping it would somehow protect her from getting seriously hurt. At the last second, Sun Amuge managed to reach the princess and save her. The guy wanted to make sure Her Highness was okay, totally clueless about what was happening behind him. And just then, the runaway horse was charging right at them. Seeing that, Sun Amuge felt a jolt of pure adrenaline that snapped him back to reality. He told the princess to hold on tight, and then he dodged again, narrowly avoiding disaster. Just when Sun Amuge thought they were in the clear, Her Highness freaked out, screaming that another one was coming right at them. The damn horse was charging straight for them, practically on top of them. Sun Amuge threw himself on top of the princess, but the horse just leaped right over them like an obstacle. Finally, the danger passed. Her Highness was informed that the servants managed to calm the crazed horses. Shia really thought she was a goner there for a second. But then she suddenly noticed something weird in her hand that made her freeze, realizing what it was. Opening her hand, the princess saw some hair falling out. The whole time, Shia hadn't been holding onto a hat string or her clothes, but onto her savior's beard. Seeing the man's red beard, the main character felt incredibly embarrassed and didn't know what to do. The best solution seemed to be to fake a faint, but without realizing it, the girl actually drifted off to sleep. I only woke up when a familiar voice told me to open my eyes. My father was sitting next to me, telling me he was scared out of his mind when he heard I'd passed out. Luckily, I'd just fallen asleep. The thing is, I couldn't believe I could sleep at a time like that. I guess I was still wiped out from yesterday. I sat up and apologized for making everyone worry. The Emperor told me not to forget that he's always worried about me, and he couldn't face Yun if anything happened to me. I nodded, and then I noticed that that guy was here too. Even after meeting him a second time, I couldn't get used to it, since I'd repaid his kindness with, well, you know. The Emperor chuckled and asked me what was up with me. I looked at the Emperor, confused when he mentioned he'd heard Sun Yun saved me today. He was obviously talking about that soldier, but what was really weird to me was that Sun Amuge knew my dad personally. The guy said it was his duty and that he only scared Her Highness, which he deeply regrets. But the Emperor knew this was the man who saved the princess from the rebels, so he asked Sun Yun to name his desire. A look of sadness crossed Shia's father's face when the guard asked for some time to live in peace. The Emperor told him he could stay in his position for now, and if he changed his mind, he should let him know. Sun Amuge thanked His Majesty for his generosity and left the chambers. Surprisingly, the Emperor saw him off with a warm smile. Noticing this, the main character immediately asked who that man was. Turns out the Emperor wanted the Crown Prince to use him for something important, but it looks like that won't be happening anytime soon. Shia couldn't understand why she hadn't been told anything, and she immediately wondered if the Crown Prince knew about it. Half a month later, in the Eastern Palace, Li Hua was taken aback, asking his little sister if she'd really cooked all this herself. The Crown Prince knew right away Shia wasn't just dropping by, but she told him not to say it like that, since she'd been stuck in her room this whole time. But now she doesn't have to worry, since most of the conspirators have been rounded up. Lucky for them, Su Cheon and Ji Hua managed to get away, and now nobody knows where they are. But the one who could have been a princess is now the daughter of a rebel, which is just messed up. She'd really hit it off with the Crown Prince, since she knew a ton about medicine and was easy to talk to. The main character realized her brother was still into medical texts. Ever since the day she ate those poisoned treats, he's been studying them non-stop. The thing is, Shia still has no clue what poison she took back then, and it's driving her nuts. The main character decided to ask her brother if he happened to know the son who saved her. Li Hua asked his sister if she knew anything about the Chet Hamin, spies who infiltrate foreign lands for intel. But the Crown Prince definitely wasn't expecting his sister's calm voice when she said she'd heard of them. Still, he explained that this soldier used to be a Chet Ha Min who wandered the borderlands for years. He'd disappear for years at a time and everyone would think he was dead, but he always came back alive. No wonder Shia thought he moved strangely. This guy's got a serious combat background. After all those years in those conditions, he probably really wants to retire now. It's probably time to dream of a quiet life. But a talent like that can't just be wasted, so the Crown Prince thinks he should be used until he's ancient. Xia noticed that her brother already had shadows under his eyes at his age, but Li Hua couldn't help it. Duty comes first. Becoming the Crown Prince, he finally understood how amazing it was that their older brother managed to find time for them. Hearing that, the main heroine froze. Then she gave Li Hua this awkward smile and explained that his older brother wasn't as hard on himself as he was. Besides, Prince Song-won became the heir practically right out of diapers. Plus, in their memories, their older brother will always be 20 years old. Li Hua agreed with Xia. It's pointless to compare, but these thoughts just won't leave him. Maybe if his brother was still alive, the rebellion wouldn't have happened. To which the main character straight up replied that whoever planned it would have made it happen anyway. Xia told her brother to stop filling his head with garbage and to think about his own well-being instead. Would Li Hua really prefer those poisoners who are always trying to off his half-brothers? The main character smiled as soon as her brother laughed and replied that her words are always crystal clear, and he likes that. So Xia decided she's going to go look for him. But for everyone else, it's going to be a secret. So yesterday, the main character charmed the Crown Prince, and this morning she made an appearance before her dad and the Queen. That means nobody's going to be looking for her for a while. The kid even managed to sweet-talk the palace maids, so this getaway should be flawless. Everything was going smoothly, until the main character got stopped in her tracks and asked where she thought she was going. The main character snapped, asking if it was against the rules to just take a stroll. Sun Amuj responded that it was a huge deal, that the young lady had left the imperial palace. Xia stared blankly at the familiar soldier. The guy looked totally different. Maybe it was because he shaved his beard. He looked like he'd dropped 10 years. Suddenly, the main character realized she'd completely spaced out. The princess gave the soldier an apologetic look and said she was sorry about his beard, and that it must have hurt like hell. Sun Amuj practically bowed to the princess, saying he'd trade his beard for her safety in a heartbeat. It'd be an honor. After hearing him out, Xia gave him a long, hard look. "Man's face looks totally beat," the heroine exclaimed, worried that he didn't have to trade anything for her safety, but Sun Amugo wasn't sweating it. Xia decided to confess she'd lost something that day, so she wanted to try and find it. The soldier started explaining it was dangerous to leave the palace, and then the princess revealed it was something that belonged to her late older brother. Sun Amuj looked totally thrown and then immediately blurted out that he'd go with her. He couldn't just walk away, sending only the princess and Lady Han. The heroes changed clothes, but no matter who they asked, nobody had seen a jade ring. That wasn't a surprise, but going back to that private house where the main character was with Su Cheon was way too risky. It's a long haul to get there, so Sun Amuge figured it'd be best if he went alone and scoped things out later. Xia started apologizing for making her companions trek all this way for nothing, so she suggested they rest up and head back. Ami tried to refuse, but her stomach started rumbling like crazy, totally blowing her cover. The crew ducked into the nearest joint, and the main character immediately ordered 3 bowls of soup and something tasty. The soldier and the maid were stunned by the princess's actions. Sun Amuge was thrown for a loop, since Her Highness had only ever eaten food that was rigorously vetted her whole life. The owner slammed a bowl on the table and asked in a threatening tone if the gentleman had a problem with her soup. Without missing a beat, the main character took a spoonful. It was way tastier than she expected. Plus, it was loaded with meat. Suddenly, the princess realized her bowl had way more meat than Ami's and Sun's portions. Xia explained it was too much meat for her, so she offered it to Ami, but the maid turned it down. Chewing his food, Sun Amuge told the princess she was really something else. His words totally caught the main character off guard. Soldier Sun choked when the princess whispered, asking if he used to be a, well, you know. The guy confirmed what she said, thinking to himself, who filled this kid's head with stuff like that? But what he really wanted to know was, wasn't she even a little bit afraid of him? Xia actually froze when she heard that question. Then, with a smile, she asked the soldier why she would be scared since he'd saved her life. Sunamige's eyes went wide with surprise at what he heard. The soldier agreed with the princess's words. Suddenly, the main character's attention was drawn to something happening behind her escort. Kids were desperately begging passersby for even a single coin, but people just got angry, shoving them away dismissively. Shia couldn't just let that slide. She called out to the kids and asked if they had a minute. The main character explained that she'd lost her jade ring near the south gate on the day of the Lantern Festival. But suddenly the older kid shouted, all worked up, asking if she thought they stole her jewelry. His outburst seemed weird to the main character. She wondered if the kids got wrongly accused like that often. She explained she was just asking if they'd seen it. The kid turned away, tossing out that they didn't know anything about it so she could just move along. But out of nowhere, the main girl suddenly threatened that if the kids left just like that, they'd regret it. Right then and there, the oldest kid heard the unmistakable sound of coins. The main girl pulled out a stack of gold coins and showed them to the kids. The kid immediately dropped to one knee and said with a smile that they could search again. They keep anything worth money separate. Shia handed over the stack of coins and promised she'd give them even more if they could find her ring. Plus, the ring has a special mark on it, so the main girl can tell by touch if it's hers or a fake. The kids happily took the payment, and as the last one left, Shia asked them to pass a message to the tavern owner. Soldier Sun approached the main girl and said that those street kids probably wouldn't keep their promise. Spreading her hands out, Shia replied that if that was the case, there was nothing she could do about it. And then she suggested finishing the soup that was left on the table. Soon evening arrived, and the soldier son advised the princess to return before dark. Shia stood up, deciding to leave the money with the landlady. Just because the kids might break their promise doesn't mean she has to lie too. The princess mounted her horse when suddenly the guard's son approached and asked if she was sure she wanted to just leave like that. The main character sadly replied that she probably really wouldn't be able to find him. The soldier son didn't answer, but looked at the princess with sorrow. But the road back to the imperial palace turned out to be not so simple. The main character froze, staring at what was happening in front of her. Several men were kicking those very kids, the ones Shia gave the coins to, and asked to find the ring. The older boy hugged his little sister tighter and shouted that he didn't steal the money. To which the man smirked and, grabbing a handful of coins, asked where paupers like them would even get so much money. Seeing the princess getting antsy, Private Song told her to hold up, he'd figure things out right away. The kid's eyes started burning with rage. He took off like a shot and demanded the guy give him the money back, but he just got kicked away like trash. It hurt so bad he couldn't even breathe right, and tears started welling up in his eyes. The guy raised his foot again and said, all pissed off, that thieves like that need to be taught a lesson. Shia yanked the reins and that thoroughbred took off like a rocket. The guy who was messing with the kids was stunned, totally froze when this dude suddenly jumped him and grabbed him by the neck, and then slammed him flat on his back. In a calm voice, the guy explained that you just can't go around hitting innocent kids like that no matter who they are. The hero started complaining, not understanding the stranger's actions, because it was the kids who stole the money, and he was just trying to set things right. Shia jumped when Chake stamped his hoof on the ground. And then the main character yelled for the horse to stop, because right now, she was charging straight at the man who was just laying into that kid a couple of minutes ago. But Chake decided to ignore his rider, so the beast kept charging full speed at the guys who were hurting the kids. He reared up right in front of one of them, but Chake calmed down immediately, and the main character apologized to the man, explaining that her horse doesn't like violence. It's dangerous here, so Shia asked the man to step back, because Chake doesn't always listen. If the horse accidentally steps on you, you'll be looking at a broken leg. Shia could pay for the treatment, sure, but who wants to limp around for the rest of their life? The hero immediately scrambled backward, scared. And then he started begging the girl to stay away. The crowd started chuckling when this dude started showing how scared he was. The main character let out a heavy sigh, and then told Chake that they could go. A buddy immediately ran up to the brunette to see if he was okay, but the guy bolted, telling him to leave him alone. The main character immediately got off her horse and asked the kid if he was all right. The boy, fighting through the pain, said he was fine. Shia suggested the kid go straight to a healer, but the boy said he didn't have the money for that. In that case, the heroine offered to send him to a free clinic, but the boy asked her not to worry about him. But suddenly his body gave out and the kid passed out. Soldier Son scooped up the kid, and the main character let out a heavy sigh the moment he asked what they were gonna do. So they ended up heading to the free clinic. The healer saw his patients out and immediately spotted the new arrivals. Soldier Son, carrying the boy on his back, told him this kid was unconscious after a beatdown by some thugs and needed help ASAP. The healer's eyes shifted to the battered boy. And then, with a guilty look, he replied that they were short-staffed too, so there wasn't much they could do. The heroes would have to try a private clinic. The main character realized they were picking and choosing who to help and who to leave behind. An idea immediately flashed through Shia's mind. She tugged on Ami's dress and, with feigned sadness, asked if maybe they should go see the princess. The maid was taken aback by those words and looked at Her Majesty in confusion. Right then, Sun said that if the princess knew, she'd definitely help, but we shouldn't bother her with every little thing. The healer was stunned to hear they actually served the princess. He immediately asked the heroes to wait a bit, promising to check the empty beds and be right back. Figures, power always comes first. Soon they found a room for the kid and got him some help. His eyes snapped wide open and he started frantically looking around at the unfamiliar surroundings. The main character perked up, seeing the boy was awake. She immediately told him to take it easy, since he'd passed out and was now in the infirmary. Shia decided to ask the boy where his parents were, but he snapped back that it didn't matter. He angrily told the girl not to pity him, saying she just got lucky being born into a good situation. Just then, Soldier Song walked into the room. The kid froze as soon as he heard the guy call that weird chick Madam. Now he felt awkward asking anything after that outburst. Understanding the situation, Shia quickly explained that the girl was fine and waiting outside with a servant. The kid declared firmly that even though his money was gone, he was still gonna get the job done. But suddenly, Soldier Song held out his hand, and out of nowhere there was a pouch full of gold coins. The main character asked her escort, surprised when he'd managed to snag those. The guy calmly replied that it happened when he was subduing that other dude, and he just grabbed him. The kid was taken aback when the girl said with a smile that it would be risky for him to hold on to the money. But Shia wasn't just gonna give it to him and take it back. She just wanted to get it to him another way. The dude was clearly intrigued by what this girl was saying. So he asked her what she was getting at, because the girl totally gets that, at the end of the day, these kids gotta eat too. Shia said she'd explain to the tavern owner where she was and pay so the kids could come by every day and ask for food. Hearing that, the kid's face lit up like a Christmas tree. With that settled, the girl got up and said she was heading out, so now the boy had to listen to the healer and chill out while he got better. Even though the main character told him to stay put, the kid jumped up and begged her to wait. And then, out of the blue, he asked when she'd be back again. The princess couldn't say for sure, but promised she'd definitely come back later and see him. The main character asked Soldier Song to let her know ASAP if the kids found the ring, and the guy gave her a nod and a smile. Shia turned back one last time and wished the boy a speedy recovery. Her words surprised the kid. No one had ever treated him like that before. Soon, his little sister was allowed into his room, and they fell asleep, feeling safe for the first time in ages. Soldier Son shifted his gaze to the princess. The main character felt it. For some reason, right then, Soldier Son was looking at her with a weird expression, and Shia started to feel a little uneasy. The man apologized and confessed that, actually, when he sees her, he's immediately reminded of a childhood friend. Even though he looks different now, he was small and weak as a kid. It sounded so absurd that she didn't believe it. It was so bad that even the stray dogs from the village used to torment son Amuge, and then a kid from next door stoking the fire grabbed a poker and defended him. Even though they can't meet anymore, when the man sees the princess, he starts to feel happy, remembering that friend. The main character glanced at her escort, and sure enough, a faint smile was playing on his lips. Shia then suggested they meet more often, which definitely surprised the Soldier Son. But that'll only be possible if he doesn't decide to retire, which he's been thinking about lately. Soldier Son smiled and said warmly that she was truly kind and generous, but he strongly urged her to avoid dangerous stunts like today, because if anything happened, he'd be devastated. Shia immediately apologized, saying she didn't do it on purpose, and explained she couldn't stop Chake when he bolted ahead. With a sly grin, the man replied that the horse was pretty smart and probably understood his mistress's intentions. The main character decided to change the subject, saying there are so many indifferent people in the world. The kid was getting beat up, but nobody stepped in. Shia chuckled when Soldier Son suggested those lowlifes probably had someone protecting them. That's why they were scared. "Mister, spare some change?" the main character suddenly heard. Even grown-ups were begging for handouts, and surprisingly, people were giving them. Turns out the capital's crawling with beggars, way more than our girl thought, all thanks to this transplanting method. It's a rice-growing technique using seedlings, which boosts yields and efficiency, but leaves a ton of people jobless. That's why our main character wants to cut down on the number of beggars by giving them work. Seriously, this is exactly what the officials should be doing. Like, you could set up a professional soldier system. People try to dodge service anyway, so there'd be little resistance. There are already plenty of mercenaries around, so the princess's idea sounded pretty good to Sun Amuj. If peasants aren't dragged into service during wartime, it'll be good for the economy too. Soon, the emperor told his daughter he'd heard about her professional army idea after hearing about the mercenaries. The main character was thrown for a loop, 'cause it's not exactly rocket science, is it? She shot a furious glare at her uncle, wondering if he'd spilled the beans to her dad. They were supposed to keep it under wraps. At least they hadn't talked about sneaking out of the palace. After seizing the rebels' assets, they found the perfect spot, so the emperor decided to build a residence for his daughter. "But Shia's only 8, she asked, confused, if it wasn't a little early for that kind of thing. The emperor sadly replied that there'd been a lot of bad stuff going on lately. It was time for something good to happen. Besides, Shia would need to choose a husband soon. Hearing that, the main character declared firmly that she didn't want to leave her father yet. Now it was clear why the princess was so attached to her dad. But His Majesty agreed. The princess was still young, and the heir to the throne hadn't picked a bride yet, so it was too soon to talk about it. As the meeting with her father wrapped up, Soldier Son approached the main character and said he'd escort her back to her chambers. But for some reason, the princess just gave him this cold stare. It totally made the guy feel awkward. On the way to her chambers, she grilled him on why he told her dad everything. But Song couldn't take credit for something he didn't do, so he told the emperor it was her idea. Besides, he'd get stuck doing more work, and Song wasn't about that life. The princess decided to ask where he served before coming to the palace. Seeing his serious face, Princess Shia knew he wasn't gonna spill. But surprisingly, he smiled and said he was stationed up north. Her eyes lit up when she heard he'd been to the Tumen River. He hadn't climbed Mount Pektu though, so she admitted she wanted to climb it someday. Soldier Son was all like, "Your Highness, how are you even planning on climbing something that high?" The main character realized with a jolt that there was no way up there right now. So, trying to play it cool, she said she'd have to settle for a trip to Mount Kumgang later. Unlike the Crown Prince, Shia isn't stuck living in the palace, so she figures she should check out other places. But first, the girl wanted to visit Jinjop. That's where the main character's mother is buried, see? As she said that, a bitter smile crept onto Shia's lips. Soldier Son froze, staring at the princess, totally not expecting her to say something like that. Then, sounding a little lost, he replied that he knew that area pretty well. If the princess wanted to visit Jinjop later, the guy wondered if he could tag along. The main character was surprised and, just in case, asked Mr. Song if he really wanted to leave. The guy confirmed it and asked her to take him in at her place. Normally, Song Amuge just wanted to be a casual guest, but when the princess wanted to go out and have some fun, she could use him. To which Shia replied, eventually she'd get some palace staff assigned to her anyway, so she'd have plenty of people at her disposal. But Mr. Song said that anything could happen down the road, like maybe the princess's husband would treat her badly. The main character smiled and suggested they talk about it later. Hearing that, a warm smile also appeared on Mr. Song's lips. He watched as the princess walked ahead. Shia, meanwhile, caught herself thinking that Mr. Song was making the same kind of weird face as Ami or Ga Yi. It's been a whole week since the main character asked the kids to find that jade ring. Looks like they're searching pretty hard, but rainy season's coming, so Shia's thinking of telling them to drop it. Ga Yi gave the princess a suspicious look and asked if she was planning on sneaking out of the castle. With that whole conspiracy thing, the palace atmosphere's still super tense, plus the princess could catch a cold in the rain. The main character pouted and started thinking about how boring it was in the palace. Out of nowhere, Ga Yi said she overheard something about the rebels yesterday. Shia got super curious and exclaimed that if the maid heard such an interesting story, she should have spilled the beans right away. Turns out the rebels were secretly talking to the exiled Prince Kyonan. The former prince told the conspirators and soldiers that he'd look favorably on their actions and then let them go. After that, he reported it to another squad of soldiers, and they completely exposed the conspirators who were contacting him. They say Kyonan said that even if His Majesty rejected him, he's still a child and subject of the state. Hearing the ministers praise the prince, Shia figured the poisoning was the mother's fault, not the son's. Turns out that whole dried persimmon incident was all Yongbin's doing. Even though a maid testified it was Prince Kyonggon's order, Yongbin confessed she did it for her son. And everyone believed her confession way more than the maid's testimony. There's not much the main character can do now, because His Majesty's not gonna just drop the punishment. But if Ga Yi hears anything like that again, Shia wants to know about it right away. Soon after, the maid came back to the princess with news. Rumors about Prince Kyonggon were spreading among the common folk. Some are even saying His Majesty's decision was way too harsh. Gossip in the palace? Fine, whatever, you can deal with that. But now the commoners are talking too, and that's just plain weird. Kyonan's being held under observation way out in Jeollado, pretty far from the capital, but the rumors still managed to spread fast. Shia wasn't about to let that guy come back from exile and live happily ever after. Her Highness suggesting she spread rumors too. Gai, the maid, was totally surprised. They were talking about all the rotten things Prince Kyonan did. The main character remembered every single one. So the rumors blew up instantly, starting with maids in the chambers who were totally in the dark. Then they slowly spread to the eunuchs who were all over the palace. And maybe even to someone who really didn't want to hear the news. Before the rumors dredged up bad memories for Shia, the crown prince decided to nip this in the bud ASAP. Gaye knocked on the princess's door and announced that the head maid from the East Palace was here, and it's about the crown prince. Apparently, the head maid wants to have a word with the princess in private. No sooner did Shay let her in than the head maid collapsed to her knees, begging Her Highness to stop the crown prince. The main character was taken aback by these words. Turns out there's been some nasty gossip going around the court lately. His Highness, the crown prince, hearing that the people are starting to favor the former prince, was absolutely livid. After a lot of thinking, he gave the order to send dried persimmons to the homes of all the ministers. Ami frowned, not understanding why the crown prince's head maid came to tell her this. The main character gave a thumbs up and replied, "Looks like my brother is surprisingly more decisive than I thought." But the head maid clearly wasn't expecting that kind of answer. She added that the tutors from the crown prince's training office tried to dissuade him, but the prince wouldn't listen. The servants are really afraid the ministers will misunderstand His Highness the crown prince's intentions. Okay, there's definitely risk involved when the almost poisoned crown prince is sending persimmons as gifts. That could be taken as a threat to the cabinet. So first things first, our girl decided to meet with His Royal Highness the crown prince. The head maid smiled and told the princess she'd escort her. Before long, they arrived at the East Palace. Li Hua frowned when he saw the princess and asked what brought her here unannounced. Shia answered honestly that she came to give her 2 cents about the dried persimmons he was planning to send to the ministers. To which the heir replied sadly that the discipline of the servants in the East Palace had become lax. He wanted to shut the ministers up before Shia found out, but things didn't go as planned. The crown prince immediately stated confidently that if his sister came here to stop him, he wouldn't listen. But then, out of nowhere, Shia asks if it wouldn't be better to send dried persimmons in her name. The crown prince clearly wasn't expecting that, because his face just went all surprised and confused. He was stunned, like, wait, say that again? The main character repeated that she was suggesting they send the dried persimmons, signed by her. Silence fell over the room. Everyone was taken aback by what she said. Li Hua broke the quiet, saying he didn't want to drag the princess into this, and if she was doing it for him, she didn't have to. Shia shot back, cold as ice, that she was the one who ate the poisoned persimmons, so it's her call. The academy officials tried to explain that if she did that, the other officials might misinterpret the crown prince's intentions. But the princess was suspicious of their intentions. It's been 5 years since the deposed prince was put under house arrest. Shia replied, "How can you just casually ignore His Majesty's will? He's the one who made the decision." The academy official bowed his head and said that was unthinkable. The heir's reputation, like the princess's, includes deeds so awful it's hard to even talk about. Like, when he tossed little Shay into the pond. The main character hasn't forgotten that incident, so now, when others talk about it, Shay won't be shocked. The Academy official reminded the princess that the deposed prince is her brother. So why isn't Her Highness covering for her brother's mistakes instead of saying such harsh things? Even though Emperor Shun faced multiple attempts on his life by his stepmother and half-brother, he still cared for his brother. Shay asked sarcastically if the crown prince threw them all in the pond, would they just accept it and show complete loyalty? So no matter how much parents mistreat a child, they just have to obey? So, just like Emperor Shun forgave his half-brother, she should forgive Kyonan. But Mengzi himself also talked about dynasties changing. The Academy official dropped to his knees in front of the princess, yelling that it wasn't like that at all. He immediately started begging for forgiveness for the misunderstanding. The main character smiled and suggested the crown prince prepare a list of officials who would receive dried persimmons. Of course, just sending persimmons wouldn't be very classy. The crown prince was surprised when the princess suggested sending other things too. Sometime later in the palace kitchen, the heroes packed boxes with delicacies, dried persimmons on the top tier, castella on the bottom. Shia also asked them to make a box without dried persimmons for the officials who still felt iffy about Kyonan. Just then, a soldier walked into the kitchen and called out to the princess. Word is, the servants found that jade ring Her Highness was looking for. But these stubborn jerks insist they'll only show it if she comes herself, so the guy came empty-handed. Shia laughed, and the soldier asked what she wanted them to do. If the princess is busy, Mr. Sun suggested he could go and pick them up instead. The main character asked Ami to send the boxes of treats tomorrow morning. Hearing that, the maid flinched. Shia explained with a whine that she promised the kids she'd definitely be back, and if she only goes out for today, she won't be able to go anywhere for a long time after. As soon as Dad finds out his daughter sent dried persimmons, he'll haul her back in, so this is the only chance she's got to get out. Ami couldn't resist the princess's pleading face. As soon as Shia spotted a familiar boy, he was fighting another kid in the middle of the street, yelling that he found it. The main character, the maid Ami, and the soldier's son were stunned by the scene. Mr. Sun stepped up to the kid and told him to knock it off. The boy started yelling, demanding the stranger let him go. The kid's buddy was stoked to see Princess show up and immediately shouted that he'd found it. Then he walked over to Shia and gave her the ring back. The main character smiled and thanked the kid, looked at the ring, confused, and asked if he was all right. The boy gave a thumbs up and said even if that dude hadn't helped, he still would have won. Shia realized the fight was because she'd asked the kid to find a jade ring in this area. So the main character asked the kid what he wanted. The boy wanted the reward the heroine was supposed to give them. Half would be enough for him. The main character shielded the kid and, frowning slightly, asked what reward they were talking about. Shia's reminding him they had a deal about food. She gave them money, but it got jacked, so the girls decided to pay the kid back. Every time Ami goes out with the young lady, it feels like one thing after another. The main character crouched down and overheard a conversation behind her. The guys were talking about the prince, saying he'd done some pretty messed up stuff back in the day. What's worse, they said he tossed the princess in the pond when she was just a baby. And it didn't stop there. Apparently a year ago, he tried to poison His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, by slipping something nasty into his dried persimmons. But the princess accidentally ate it and almost died, which is why the prince got exiled. Mr. Song couldn't believe what he was hearing. Did the young lady really go through all that? Noticing the soldier staring at her, dumbfounded, the main character returned his gaze and gave him a warm smile. The man quietly called out to her. Then he asked if all of this was really true. Yeah, the main character replied calmly. Everything the man had just heard was the honest-to-God truth, and she didn't see any point in denying it. Mr. Sun's face fell. He couldn't believe she could talk about it so casually. Suddenly, a kid raised his hand and shouted that he was good at finding stuff too, so he was ready to help. The girl awkwardly answered that she didn't need anything right now. But then the main character suddenly remembered that there was one thing. To the kid's surprise, she asked them to give her a tour of the capital, so they all headed out for a walk together. These big shots have no clue how hard life is for regular folks, so Shia decided to see for herself. The kid said that under the bridge where they live ain't no place for some pampered princess. Actually, this is all part of researching everyday life during the Joseon era. One of the girls stopped, recognizing the place. This is where they crawled around looking for the lady's thing, and then the girls started showing how they did it. The ring was all muddy and black, but the kids carefully washed it in the stream, which the main character appreciated. Shia flinched when the boy figured out that the thing they found didn't belong to her. The lady was so desperate to find it, but after she got it, she doesn't even look at it, which the kid thought was super weird. The truth is, the main character felt awkward. These kids got completely filthy finding this thing. That deserves some appreciation, right? Shia confessed that, honestly, she figured the ring was a goner from the start, since it had been missing for so long. She said it was the last thing her brother gave her before he passed. It was super important to him, and Shia would have been devastated if she lost it, so she decided to give searching for it a shot. The little girl gave a small smile and said she had a brother too, but he ate something bad, was in agony for days, and then just died. The main character froze solid the second she heard that. Crossing his arms, the boy said he didn't even know free clinics were a thing. But even if the kid had known, there's no way they could have actually helped him. Shia wondered if there wasn't any kind of system to help kids begging on the street. A girl walking by stopped as soon as the little one called out to her, calling her sis who gives good food. The girl ran up to her and asked her to give them their usual. A young woman noticed an unfamiliar face among the kids, so she asked who the girl was. The main character forced a smile, but inside she felt a growing unease. The girl menacingly asked the kids if they were really trying to pull one over on this trusting young lady. The little girl ran away scared, shouting that all the girl ever does is accuse them for no reason. Shia explained to the stranger that these kids weren't trying to scam her, but unexpectedly, this girl asked the young lady not to be too soft on these begging kids. If you keep helping them, they'll start depending on it, and if you're not going to help them forever, it'll just mess them up. The main character thanked her for the advice, but one of the kids got hurt because of her, since Shia couldn't just pretend she didn't see anything. The girl immediately got flustered and started checking the older boy for injuries, while he screamed that it hurt. Shia smiled, realizing these people were good. Once they were gone, the princess asked if the kids went to that house often, and the little girl said yes, because they gave out food there. Sometimes, when they're sick, the older girl gives them medicine, but makes them work for it in return. Maybe it was also a doctor's house, but the kids rarely saw any sick people there. The main character listened to the boy carefully and said that sounded pretty fishy. Just then, a commoner walked up to the guard and yelled that those were the kids who stole his ring and money. Soldier Song explained to the lady that this guy was one of those who was shaking down the kids for money last time. He probably came looking for revenge, thinking the kids stole that pouch of coins that Soldier Song returned. But he mentioned a ring, so maybe the kids themselves spread rumors when they were going around other districts looking for it. The guard was all like, "If what you're saying is true, these punks gotta pay for what they did." The kid shot back, "We didn't steal anything." The main girl stepped forward and asked, "Is it true these kids stole a ring?" The guard got suspicious when he realized this lady was decked out in silk. With a straight face, Shia announced, "I'm the one who asked these kids to find the ring. But if the ring they brought back turns out to be stolen, the heroine would be in hot water too, so she offered to make things right. First though, she figured she'd better ask the guy what kind of ring he's looking for. This dude started sweating bullets when the main girl asked if it was a jade ring or a silver one. The guy couldn't give a straight answer, so Shia asked coldly, "What color was it?" Sounds like our hero just said that if someone messes up, they gotta face the music. But if he falsely accused an innocent person, calling him a thief, what kind of punishment is fitting for that? Suddenly, the guy remembered it was a dark green jade ring. The main character smiled gently and replied that the kids did find a dark green jade ring. The terrified kids tried to tell the princess they didn't steal the ring. If this ring really belonged to someone else all along, then there's nothing we can do about it. The man smirked, feeling victorious. But then, completely out of the blue, the main character asked what kind of pattern was on it. The guy started thinking this chick was just testing him, so he answered that there couldn't be any pattern on a jade ring. Shia agreed, because if it's top-grade jade, it won't have a noticeable pattern. But both what she was looking for and what these kids found are lower-grade jade. So this jade ring isn't what the guy was looking for, which means he's gonna have to eat his words. The dude started stammering, saying he swore these kids stole the jade ring. The kids laughed, called him a liar, and asked what the heck he meant by they stole something. Out of nowhere, the guy lunged at the kids. But boom! Soldier Song stepped right in front of him, politely telling him to back off for his own good. This time, though, the hero wasn't listening. He swung his arm, yelling that nobody tells him what to do. Soldier Song instantly grabbed his arm. Then he twisted it behind his back, warning him that if he kept harassing the lady, he'd get a taste of his own medicine. An officer walked up right then and ordered them to stop acting like a bunch of lowlifes. He flinched, and a look of total confusion spread across his face when Song Amuge asked which unit the guards belonged to. Looks like those two are tight. If a soldier's framing an innocent guy for personal reasons, we can't just let that slide. The main girl jumped when Sergeant Sun asked for her take. Then, after a moment, she said she didn't want to bother her dad with something so trivial. But since they're caught up in this whole mess, maybe she should report it after all. The guard immediately dropped to his knees in front of her, begging her to look the other way just this once. He's got a family, kids to feed. Shia warned him that if he ever got involved in something like this again, or hung out with lowlifes, there would be consequences. The guard agreed with her, then turned on the scumbag, asking him if he was incapable of feeling any remorse. The princess is letting it go this time, but if it happens again, she's not going to stand by and do nothing. Finally, the men left and the main character could breathe again. But then, out of nowhere, she felt someone staring at her. You could see the admiration in their eyes. Every one of them was thinking how awesome it would be to be as badass as she is. Shia felt awkward. The kids wanted to be like her, not the tough guy who protected them. The boy scratched the back of his head, working up his courage. And then he said he wanted to live so he could speak his mind and argue without holding back. The main character's eyes widened. She suggested the kid go to school. It could help. First, he needed to learn to read and write at least. Just knowing the alphabet won't make you smarter, but the amount of information he can absorb will increase big time. The kid decided it wasn't necessary, even though he wanted to get as smart as she was. Of course, this kid won't become a genius overnight, but it's still useful in life, so Shia needs to get that across somehow. In the end, the main character decided that she needed to think about this issue a little more. Amy suddenly told the madam that it was getting late, which meant it was time for them to head back. The kids perked right up, though the little girl was bummed because she was having a blast hanging out with her. The main character smiled, thanked the kids, and said she had a really great time. Things are going to be tough for a bit, but if the chance comes up, it'd be awesome to see you guys again sometime. Shia froze when the boy called out to her. Turns out he'd been wanting to thank the madam ever since last time. The main character gave him a warm smile and said there was no need to thank her. A while later, the emperor asked his daughter, with a hint of disbelief, if it was true that she sent those trinkets. Shia lowered her head respectfully and said yes. His Majesty couldn't understand how Shia could do something like that, and the girl explained that she'd heard some things too. A heavy silence hung in the air for a moment. The emperor was completely baffled. Did the princess really think her own father couldn't protect her from anything? But Shay knew all too well that if powerful officials turned against them, it would cause her father and brother a lot of trouble. Still, the emperor couldn't wrap his head around how she could even consider doing something like this. Shay tried to explain that the crimes they committed were far from insignificant. The person who ordered poison to be slipped into the court lady's drinks that day wasn't Lady Yongbin, and there's proof of that. When Lady Su was deposed but still free, dead animals kept turning up in the inner palace chambers. A lot of them were perfectly intact, except they'd been vomiting blood. The main character knew that without solid evidence, it would be hard to believe. Letting out a heavy sigh, the emperor asked if the crown prince had ordered her to send the boxes. Shia apologized to her father, saying she couldn't be such a compliant sister as to follow her older brother's orders so precisely. The emperor smiled slightly, agreeing with his daughter's words. And then he stood up and unexpectedly approached the princess. The main character was really surprised when the emperor suddenly hugged her tightly, making her eyes widen. The ruler of the empire began apologizing to his daughter for making her worry so much. Actually, Shia thought she was definitely going to get chewed out. However, after the boxes of dried persimmons were sent, voices began to say that the lady should face the ultimate consequence. The reason was that the very fact that opponents were trying to put a criminal on the throne was considered a problem. Contrary to the main character's fears, the rumors about her weren't all bad. It seemed like there were sympathetic feelings emerging. Hearing rumors about the possible release of his sworn enemy, she sent him sweets. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, except for one little hiccup. The old lady blew a gasket, yelling about how dare the princess show her face after what she did to her grandson. Shia tried to explain she just wanted to visit her grandma and bring her some tasty treats. But out of nowhere, the woman smacked the tray right out of the princess's hands. She screamed that she doesn't have a granddaughter who's so consumed with problems with her own brother that she'd do such terrible things. The princess is trying to resolve issues with her brother with these pathetic pastry schemes, and the madam just can't stand for it. The woman ordered Shia to apologize immediately to the ministers she'd sent offerings to for her disgraceful behavior. The news had already spread to the Dowager Queen's secluded pavilion. Looking at the two guys behind her grandma, she figured they were the ones who stirred things up. She asked the Dowager Queen point blank why she was so ticked off. Shia sent those sweets to the ministers, working their butts off to wipe out that traitorous gang. The old lady, all confused, asked if the princess was calling her a senile hag making up lies about her. How could a young princess be so messed up as to want her own brother dead? The main character said all innocent-like that she honestly didn't get how that could be considered blackmail. The Queen Dowager was floored by her granddaughter's words and couldn't get a word out. Right, because how do you explain that to someone who almost kicked the bucket after eating poisoned persimmons? The main character replied meekly that, as a young girl, it made her happy that the Queen Dowager was so angry with her. Back when she was just a clueless kid, and the deposed Prince Kenan tried to do her in, wasn't Her Majesty just as furious on her behalf back then? The Queen Dowager was speechless, hearing the princess's question. The main character started to wonder if her grandma really wasn't plotting something after all. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes, and she asked, stunned, if none of it was real. Seeing the princess's tears, the woman was taken aback. Then she spun around and yelled, saying she couldn't even stand to look at the princess, so she needed to get out of her sight like yesterday. "So, what am I supposed to do then?" Shia exclaimed. But the Queen Dowager didn't stop and just walked away. Ami politely asked Her Highness to return to her chambers, but the main character flatly refused. She had disrespected her grandma's memory, so now she couldn't just go back and relax with a clear conscience. Shia intended to sit on that stone floor and beg for forgiveness until her grandma forgave her. Stepping outside, Sanbin noticed the sky, which looked like it was about to pour. "Time's almost up. Your Highness needs to be at morning greetings soon." But it's been a whole freaking hour, and the maids still can't figure out how long the princess plans to just stand there. At least it's not a scorcher out here today, that's one good thing. Shia flashed back to her grandma, saying her heart was breaking knowing Kionan was locked up. Every time the Queen Dowager showed up, Shia looked the other way even though she was protecting Prince Kionan. The princess even took poison to exile that lowlife, and now Grandma wants her to just back down? Right then, the rain started coming down. Ami worriedly asked the princess to come inside, but Shia pushed her away, saying she wouldn't be able to rest easy if she went back now. The maid tried to tell Her Highness she still wasn't fully recovered. Just then, out of nowhere, the Emperor showed up and called his daughter's name. The main character whirled around, totally not expecting to see her dad. The Crown Prince was right there with him, and you could see the worry and confusion all over their faces. Soon after, Shia changed her clothes and assured her father that she was totally fine. This time, Mom went too far so the Emperor couldn't understand how she could defend the deposed prince right in front of Shia. The princess wanted it to stop ASAP because if the Emperor contradicted Mom, things could get really ugly in the palace. The ruler of the empire asked his daughter to stay away from the Dowager Queen's pavilion for a while. The main character didn't argue with his decision, and then Shia's attention was drawn to the Crown Prince. For some reason, he had that look on his face again. Truth is, Shia was planning on dragging this war out and, at some point, conveniently faint. The door burst open, and it was Songbin standing there. The main character was totally surprised to see Her Majesty. The woman rushed over to the princess and pulled her into a tight hug. She asked if the princess hadn't said herself that she'd come to see her after visiting the Queen Dowager's pavilion today. Songbin knew the royal family was visiting the Queen Dowager's pavilion today and figured something was up. It all made sense now. The queen sensed something fishy ahead of time, told people to be ready, and then called for her dad. And so, the four of them ended up sitting down for a meal together, which made everyone feel kinda weird. That evening, the queen sent over 2 food packages through a court lady. One was full of sweets from the royal kitchen. The main character lifted the lid to see what was in the other box. She was totally stunned when she saw what was inside. It was filled with a crazy amount of unbelievably gorgeous jewels. The next day, the Empress asked how the princess could act so disrespectfully towards the Dowager Queen. First and foremost, the princess needs to remember that her health should always come first. His Majesty was seriously ticked off about yesterday's incident and gave a major dressing down to those who fed the Dowager Queen that garbage. But this all happened because the princess wasn't thinking, so she needs to be extra careful about what she says and does from now on. Sanbin really wanted the princess to get it. The main character glanced down at their hands intertwined with the Empress. Out of nowhere, Her Majesty promised the princess that she would protect her, so Xia has nothing to be afraid of anymore. The main character asked if Her Majesty wasn't worried about something. Sanbin smiled and said that the Emperor would never betray the Crown Prince and Princess. Figures Xia didn't even get a mention. Guess I gotta start baking treats again tomorrow. Day in, day out, Xia would visit the Queen Dowager and she'd just get the cold shoulder. Like the weather was mirroring the Queen Dowager's mood, it had been gloomy and overcast for days. Xia remembered the beggars. She'd heard they lived in a tent under the bridge, so she started worrying about the rising water level. The princess asked Guy if it was really that hard to get those beggar kids some kind of shelter from the weather. The maid replied that the princess's personal funds weren't exactly small, but they weren't enough to spend without limits. It'd be good to ask for help from one of the king's relatives, but Xia didn't want to create any unnecessary obligations. Suddenly, the princess remembered those jewels she could easily turn into cash. She asked the maids to take the big ones and exchange them for money. Small stuff doesn't stand out as much, so the maids could probably keep a trinket or two. Consider it hazard pay for getting soaked yesterday. After all that, the princess asked for Private Son to be brought to her. The maids were happy to oblige and promised to take care of everything. Later that evening, Private Son came to the Emperor as requested. The Emperor and Crown Prince stopped their discussion when they saw the soldier approach. With a smile, the Emperor asked his loyal subject to tell him how things had been going lately. The man replied that thanks to His Majesty's boundless grace, he was living in peace and contentment. The Emperor wondered if the princess was giving the guard a hard time, to which son Amuge replied that he wouldn't even dream of such a thing. What's more, ever since he tried the egg rice cake the princess gave him, he's been counting down the days until the next treat. Hearing this, the Emperor burst out laughing. Then he cut right to the chase, asking Soldier Song if he'd changed his mind about the offer the Emperor made him before. But Song Amuge couldn't wrap his head around how a worthless, worn-out servant could possibly look after His Highness. The Emperor knew damn well this servant had a burning desire, something he'd give his life for. But now, the guy who said that, the one who came back from the brink, is saying he doesn't want anything. Still, the fact that Soldier Song hasn't left yet and is still hanging around the palace means life here can't be that bad. Song Amuge respectfully ventured that he wanted to stick around the palace for a bit, close to Her Highness. The Emperor was taken aback by his subordinate's choice. The soldier confessed that looking at Her Highness, who's a total enigma, he can't help but worry, which is why he can't bring himself to leave. Truth be told, this servant may have mentioned something to Her Highness once about those beggars living under the bridge. The Emperor nodded, knowing Xia was a curious kid. So the princess asked what would happen to those kids if it poured during the rainy season. And then she said she wanted to donate her own money to give them shelter from the rain and wind. Even if it wasn't enough to save everyone, the princess thought you shouldn't think that way about the ones who just need to get through one rainy night. Even in the summer when it rains, it's gotta get pretty cold. The rainy season's coming up fast, so Xia wanted the kids to have a roof and walls to sleep under ASAP. If the government got involved, it'd be too late, so it's better for someone who can act right now to take care of it. That's exactly why the princess put Soldier Son in charge of the project. Thinking about it 1,000 times won't get you as far as actually doing something, so the Emperor said, kinda bummed out, that he was worse than the little princess. He ordered the Crown Prince to remember that the princess's heart is the kind of heart a king needs to have for his people. Li Hua nodded, but he figured Xia probably saw something back in early April that he totally missed. The news hit Xia sometime after the downpour finally stopped. Word's been getting around that the princess used her own money to keep the people safe. Xia remembered them keeping it all hush-hush, so she couldn't figure out how the rumors got out. Now everyone's singing the princess's praises, saying she's a shining example compared to the rest of the family. Xia awkwardly told Gai that she was glad she was happy about it. The main character knew there was only one person who could have spilled the beans. That soldier, Son. Shia's hand flinched, and her little tower went tumbling when she heard the Emperor brought up her actions at the council meeting. The little princess, still so young, is already thinking of her people and taking action, while none of the capital's ministers set such an example. The main character couldn't believe it. Did her father really call out the ministers using her name? She immediately ordered them to bring Soldier Son to her, ASAP. As soon as the guy showed up, the princess started laying into him. She'd been hooking him up with treats, and he paid her back by stabbing her in the back. The soldier admitted he told His Majesty that she was giving shelter to orphans, but he didn't spill the beans about her sneaking out of the palace. Shia was lost in thought, wondering if this was a plea for mercy. She considered the possibility that the guy actually told her father himself, but then she didn't get who spread the rumors all over the capital. The guy stammered, saying it was the kids who did it. He just told them it was something for her, and they got all excited and started blabbing about it everywhere. Naturally, people asked who was giving the kids a roof over their heads, and the kids just told the truth. After all, since it involved the princess, everyone had only good things to say. If Soldier Song only did what he was ordered to do, he wouldn't have made it back alive. When you're setting up a shelter for the homeless, how could the locals possibly complain? The main character agreed with that because that whole not in my backyard thing happens here too. What's more, way more people showed up than expected, and they all wanted to know who started this whole thing. Shia replied that if they'd been late, people might have thought she was just doing charity for the clout. The princess didn't want to admit it, but Soldier Song played it smart. Still, she didn't get why he was so loyal. Still, the princess wasn't thrilled that they were plotting something behind her back. She told the guy to make sure he tells her before he does anything next time. Soldier Song explained that once everyone found out the princess started it, they stopped acting like jerks. See, people had a lot of complaints at first because of the rules. The first rule was that you gotta boil your water in the summer before drinking it, and wash at least once a week. Plus, people had to chop a certain amount of firewood and a bunch of other stuff. Word is, most of the adults who wanted to live at the shelter heard the conditions and immediately changed their minds. So the people who actually ended up moving into the princess's shelter were mostly orphans, sick folks, and women. Officer Song used the money Shia gave him to hire some of his old army buddies to run the place. Also, the princess wanted to hire someone to teach the kids at the shelter, like reading, writing, and basic math. And our girl already had someone in mind for the job. They arrived at a little house that looked totally deserted at first glance. Officer Song told the maid, Gayi, and the lady that he'd ask around the neighboring houses and be right back, asking them to wait a bit. Shia was curious how she was doing. After living in the palace, adjusting to a place like this must be tough on her. But hey, at least there's a well near the house, so maybe it's not all that bad. Just then, our main character noticed Lady Min, who exclaimed indignantly, "What kind of backwards nonsense is this?" The dude's like, how was I supposed to know they'd kick her out of the palace so damn early? He shoved her, just after she said that money they sent should have been enough. The main girl clapped a hand over her mouth, totally horrified. Lady Min jumped when someone called out to her. The maid, Ga'i, and the princess rushed over, asking if she was okay. Shia's eyes showed she didn't understand what was going on. The guy helped Lady Min up right away and, thinking they were court ladies, explained he was her brother. Things have just been kind of rough lately, so he's just, sharing his troubles with his sister. So the jerk didn't get it. Did these esteemed ladies really come to see Lady Min empty-handed? Then, Soldier Song walked up and coldly asked if this guy had business with the ladies. Lady Min's brother's voice started to shake as he stammered something about just wanting to say hello. Then he bolted, muttering he'd catch up with the esteemed ladies some other time. With Soldier Song around, she is definitely calmer, but on the other hand, something feels off. She walked up to Lady Min and mentioned it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. The other maids were totally shocked to see the princess. The main character gave a warm smile and suggested they head inside to talk first. When a lady passes, the maids from her private chambers are temporarily sent to live outside the palace. Plus, they're marked as having failed to protect their mistress, so returning to the palace is pretty much impossible. This wasn't about palace work. The main character wanted Lady Min to help her at the orphanage. You can't just feed them and give them shelter and call it a day. Shia wanted to give them a decent education. Lady Min tried to explain that these kids came from pretty humble beginnings and, well, their personalities weren't exactly top-notch. To which Shia coldly asked, Aren't most of the palace maids from families that supply servants to the court anyway? But they all serve faithfully in the palace precisely because they were educated here since they were kids. Min Sang-gung gave an awkward smile and agreed with the princess's words. The main character had heard that maids in the private chambers were supposed to be better educated than the others. No one could say for sure when the palace would call them back into service, but Shia felt bad seeing the maids just sitting around here, twiddling their thumbs. The main character's proposal wasn't just intended for Lady Min. This'll be way harder than teaching what they expect in the palace, and there's probably gonna be a ton of headaches these girls aren't even ready for. But if they're around, the princess will feel more at ease. Besides, there aren't many people in this world who have the experience to train and manage others, and who the princess can actually trust. Besides, this place is crawling with people, so scumbags like that one from before won't dare pull any crap. That's why Shay wanted to know what Ms. Min thought about it. And then the woman replied, since she doesn't have much stuff, it'll only take a day to pack. Ms. Min will move there tomorrow then. The main character was incredibly happy to hear that. The next day, Shay came to the orphanage, where she told the kids that she was friends with the princess and convinced her to build the place. She was immediately greeted by a familiar little girl, but the girl was quickly pulled away by the cheek and scolded for jumping on Ms. like that. The former spy couple apologized to Ms. These were the same former colleagues that Soldier Song mentioned, so Shay told them not to worry about it. The little one said her brother went out to get firewood and gather herbs. The main character listened to the girl carefully and offered to check if she was washing up properly. The girl insisted she takes care of herself, saying her aunt scrubbed her so hard today she thought her skin was coming off. Just then, the other kids returned to the orphanage. The main character froze, seeing the state that familiar boy was in. She immediately exclaimed, shocked, why he was all beaten up and what had happened. The kid was stunned and, caught off guard, asked how she even ended up here. The main character raised an eyebrow in confusion and reminded him that she was the one who set everything up here. The boy helping his friend walk said they ran into some real lowlife. Shia pleaded with him to tell her who did this to him, that he's so scared to even talk. Suddenly, the princess noticed a strange man standing near the kids and asked suspiciously who he was. The hero flashed a smile and explained that his name was Maury, and he'd been sent by Mr. Sun to look after the children. The main character was glad to meet him, but she really wanted to know what had happened to the kids. Maury immediately apologized and said that, honestly, he didn't see how the kids got hurt himself. They were collecting firewood and mushrooms when suddenly there was a commotion coming from the stream. Must have been the big shots arriving. The kids started watching them, but they were shooed away, told not to ruin the gentleman's mood, and they took off running. And as they ran, those guys started messing with them for kicks, so the kids begged them to stop, but they started hitting them. One of them was straight up chasing them, like the kids being scared was a joke to him, so the kids ran from him and then tumbled down the slope. The boy yelped as soon as Shia touched his leg, and the princess knew right away he was seriously injured. The kid added that he thought those people were deliberately lying in wait for them, because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. You could see the outrage flash across Maury's face the second he heard about it. The injured kid told those damn brats to shut their traps and get lost, but yelped again when Shia touched his wound. So these fancy guys are throwing daily feasts and systematically bullying the kids. What if we taught the kids some kind of martial art? Shia suggested, but Maury pretended he didn't get it. The princess immediately squeezed out some tears and pleaded, saying she wished the kids could learn enough to protect themselves. That got to the guy, and he asked the princess to entrust the task to him. Like it was nothing, Shia mentioned that starting tomorrow, a teacher would be coming to teach the kids how to read and write. The boy exclaimed in shock, saying he thought they were only going to be taught about fire and herbs. Of course, that's important too, but if the kids want to avoid getting beat up in the future, they need to learn something else as well. Shia was taken aback when the boy replied that he understood perfectly, but pointed out that they didn't have anyone backing them up. The main character immediately declared that this was the princess's personal residence, so they were her people too. So from now on, if anyone tries to mess with you guys, just say the word and Her Highness will take care of it. However, the princess won't just blindly believe what you say, she'll need solid proof. That's why you kids need to learn how to read and write, so you can write her a letter about your unfair situation. Then, once the princess knows what's going on, she can teach those lowlifes a lesson. Shay's words really got to the kid, so he promised right then and there that he'd learn to read and write and tell her about all the injustice. Finally, the mission to spark a thirst for knowledge is a success. Shay found out that the kid remembered the faces of those who wronged them, so she asked him to find out some things about them, because the main character wanted to deal with them. After tasking the kids and Mori with investigating, it turned out that the guy who was regularly bullying the children wasn't just some noble. He was a low-ranking official, 7th grade, the junior kind. Shia went to the prince and told him that all anyone's talking about at the market lately is officials abandoning their posts. Now they're saying these guys have become a real problem because they're constantly hassling the poor and hitting on women. They say since they're nobles, there's basically nothing anyone can do about it. Li Hua just laughed, figuring the princess just wanted to distract her brother, who was bored of studying. Realizing her brother didn't believe her, Shia quickly got up and announced she had to go. Lately, she's been working hard on new dessert recipes. Even though her grandmother doesn't exactly love having her around, she still eats them. Li Hua was stunned, realizing his sister was actually serious about leaving. After that, a whole 2 weeks went by. The official exclaimed in disbelief, asking what this was all about and why he was being let go. They told him 5 days AWOL was grounds for termination. The guy showed up to work so rarely, no wonder he missed the memo about the crackdown. The order targeting him and other slackers was issued ages ago. The ex-official was pissed. Getting canned for a few days off seemed totally unfair. The girl suggested he get the Minister of Internal Affairs to put in a good word, since he's family. But the guy wasn't that dumb, he'd already tried that. He was sure His Excellency would hear him out. But all he got was a dismissive comment about how his nephew was only good for chasing skirts. Lately, His Majesty's been super moody, so his uncle told him to keep his head down. The guy had no choice but to agree. This whole thing could be the final nail in the coffin with his dad. The girl gave him a sultry look and quietly asked if that was true. The guy froze, seeing the way she was looking at him. And then, in an instant, his face flushed red. On the way home, he muttered under his breath, calling her a gold digger who just bled guys dry. His dad was gonna flip his lid, and like an idiot, he walked into that place and, wouldn't you know it, ran into that kind of lowlife. Suddenly, he spotted a kid he recognized. Back then, the hero was wasted by the creek and tried to mess with him, but he fought back so hard he slipped and fell off the cliff. Before, covered in dirt, this kid was nothing special, but now with a clean face, he looked pretty decent. The official immediately walked up to the kid and reached out to him. The kid flinched when he saw the familiar guy, who said he was gonna pay for ruining his day. The ex-official told the kid not to worry, he could take care of him. Besides, it'd be a good learning experience for him. He froze when the boy suddenly called out for some Mr. Mori. The guy appeared out of nowhere and chopped the scumbag in the neck. Soon, the princess got word that the capital was buzzing about a massive wave of official firings. A lot of them took the new rules too lightly, relying on old connections and thinking they could get away with it again. Everything was going according to plan. The princess managed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get rid of the corruption and give people jobs. After Shia told the prince about a bunch of officials abandoning their posts, Li Hua blew his top. While some people are busting their butts working, others are just collecting a paycheck and goofing off. The Crown Prince took this issue to his father with a request, which is what finally got rid of those chronic truants. And lately there have been nobles in the capital turning up drunk and, well, let's just say sleeping in the gutters. After that, to protect the kids, Shia begged her father for an official sign with a name on it. Gotta say, the result blew everyone away. The effect was incredible. They took one character from Shia's name and one from her title, Suyeon, and came up with the name Shionwon. But the main character figured her dad was just too lazy to come up with a better name. The Crown Prince laughed and said that now everything made sense to him. Shia smiled too, even though she could see that Li Hua had been really run down lately. Madame Moon came into the room. She'd gone and gotten a blanket ready. While the Crown Prince was still cracking up, Shia went over to him and told him to get to bed pronto. Alright, so after a while, cleaning house with those deadbeat officials actually had a surprising outcome. The emperor asked the prince what to do with the slaves, and he decided it'd be fair to put them to work for the good of the kingdom. After that recent treason thing, entire families, 3 generations deep, got wiped out. Back then, 3 generations meant they snuffed out your whole bloodline, dad's side, mom's side, wife's side. But some of the slackers who got canned for goofing off turned out to be related to those families involved in that whole mess. So the emperor showed some mercy this time and pardoned the descendants of those families who'd served him well. The ones who survived became property of the imperial family, basically state-owned slaves. Shia suggested letting these state-owned slaves earn their freedom over time, after serving a certain amount of time. And if they put in even more time, their families could get their freedom too. Or His Majesty could just use them for public works projects. Both proposals made sense, so the emperor gladly accepted them. It seemed like that was that, but then Shia got a gift. The emperor granted the princess some of those very same slaves. He did it as a reward for Her Highness's role in calming the public discontent. After the recent uprising, the people were on edge. The atmosphere was tense, but by taking care of the needy in time, we managed to defuse the situation. Back then, Father granted her a plot of land for a palace, but construction hasn't even started yet. Thing is, Shia already has plenty of maids to serve her, so the princess didn't get why she needed slaves too. Maybe it was a hint to use them at the Xiunwan orphanage. And that's how our main character ended up here, to assign the new slaves to the orphanage. Most of them are women, the elderly, and children, which means they can't be sent to military service or hard labor. If Shia were in her father's place, she'd also consider sending them here the best possible outcome. The main character took a good look at the slaves, who were shaking with fear and expecting the worst. Life here's probably gonna seem even tougher than before, but the princess isn't planning on treating them unfairly. Shia was starting to feel like some evil overlord, shamelessly exploiting her servants. Then again, when you think about it, they were just hauled off to the Justice Department, put through the ringer, and turned into slaves overnight. These people have it rough, but the main character couldn't just set them free, plus she needs the extra hands right now. The princess clasped her hands together like she was praying, deciding to lighten the mood, and then suggested they start by testing everyone's skills. 4 of them could read and write, 3 were good cooks, and 3 were pretty handy with a needle and thread. There was even one guy who had a real talent for drawing. It would be cool to capture the local scenery or scenes from the kids' lives in paintings. Scanning down the list, the main character noticed someone had musical instrument skills. It's a decent skill to have, but if they start teaching the kids music, the others might think we're running a certain kind of establishment here. One of the kids said he wanted to learn music, but they yanked him away immediately. The main character decided music lessons would only be for kids who actually wanted them. Shia's attention was grabbed by one slave in particular. She was the only one with skills in everything. This girl wasn't just good at riding, she could even handle a bow and arrow. This slave was so talented, the main character instantly wanted her, no matter the cost. Later, when Shia had her own castle, she decided she absolutely had to bring this girl with her. The princess asked Madame Min to assign tasks to the slaves based on their skills. A boy went up to the madam and asked why there were suddenly so many people, and she awkwardly replied that it just happened that way. The kids noticed that even the slave girl had a last name. Now that they've learned to read a little, they've also learned how to complain. Shia asked the boy if he wanted a last name too, and he immediately said no. Hearing this, his little sister immediately raised her hand and exclaimed that she wanted a first and last name. Her current name is Ugly, so the little one wanted a different one for herself. As soon as her older brother mentioned her name was Katnani, the girl immediately cried out that she didn't come up with that. She grabbed Shia's hand and with tears in her eyes begged her to give her a new, beautiful name. The main character suggested asking Madame Min about it, but the little one insisted that Shia do it. In that case, Shia decided to name the little girl A Young. The girl was overjoyed. She liked the new name much better than the old one. The other kids' eyes lit up behind her. They swarmed around the main character, begging her to give them new names too. After a while, Shia finally named everyone. They'd known each other for ages, but she still didn't know their names. Suddenly, the main character realized she'd given names to everyone except one. Looking at the boy with the braid, Shia asked if he wanted a name too. The kid awkwardly replied that it must be hard enough on her already, so she shouldn't worry about it. Shia told him not to sweat it and asked what kind of name he'd like. Before answering, the boy suddenly decided to ask what her name was, which really surprised the main character. Gei, standing nearby, was shocked at the kid's nerve. How dare he ask the princess of this empire her name? The boy quickly explained that he just wanted a name that sounded similar to hers. His eyes went wide the second the main character said her name was Shia. The princess suggested naming the kid Jia, which means wise and clear. The boy smiled, a faint blush creeping onto his face. He obviously liked the new name. Jia immediately thanked her. Xia wanted to know about the injury he'd gotten before, and he told her it was completely gone. Turns out the healer lady was able to fix him right up. That was the same girl who was yelling about why he hadn't come to her when Jia was unconscious last time. The main character remembered that kind woman. Her name was Ho Seongji. Her parents passed away, and now she lives with her uncle, who's a healer. Jia just mentioned it because he thought she seemed interested in that kind of thing. Looks like this kid's loyalty just went through the roof. The main character's even wondering if it's a little too much. On the way back, Ga Yi warned her that if word got out the princess was hanging out in a dump like this, things would get real bad. But Jia's already acting different, way more careful. He's probably figured out she's the princess. Out of nowhere, Soldier Song asks if Milady isn't headed straight back to the palace today. The main character froze, seeing some movement up ahead. Two guys, totally hammered, were stumbling their way towards them. As soon as their eyes met, Princess Xia decided she was better off just walking around them. But then, all of a sudden, the dude let out this blood-curdling scream, and then just face-planted into the dirt. An awkward silence hung in the air. Xia was like, "Wait, did this dude seriously just faint when he saw me?" The main character was sure this had something to do with her, so she couldn't just leave him there. She told Soldier Son to put the guy on his horse so they could get him to a doctor. The dude helped the princess down from her horse and promised to personally take him to the free clinic, if that's what she wanted. The main character smiled and suggested they go together anyway. Arriving at the clinic, the princess immediately spotted Ho Seongji and a woman who was thanking her for her help. The girl advised her to make sure to give the kid those herbal remedies morning and night, and he'd definitely get better. The woman pressed a small pouch of coins into Ho Seongji's hand and asked him to take it for his help. He was their first kid after 7 years of marriage, which meant Ho Seongji was a seriously blessed dude. The healer waved goodbye to the patient, wishing her all the best. As soon as she heard someone call out from behind, Ho Seongji turned around. The main character awkwardly looked down and asked, flustered, if she could have a moment. Ho Seongji immediately recognized the lady who came with the kids last time, and Xia explained she brought someone who fell on the road. The healer gasped in surprise when she saw the uncle. She immediately rushed over to the horse. The main character froze, realizing that this man was Ho Seongji's uncle. After a while, they figured out the guy was okay. He just passed out for a bit. Ho Seongji gratefully thanked the lady for bringing her uncle, but the main character explained that the man fainted as soon as he saw her, which seemed pretty weird. Turns out this guy's a little freaked out by kids. Right away, Ho Seongji knew she was from Xionyuan, 'cause the kids are always talking about her. Like how Xia's always hooking them up with treats and giving them cool clothes. And Ho Seongji also heard she's teaching the kids how to read and write. She remembered telling that girl not to spoil the strays too much so they don't get too dependent. Now the girl realized she'd been kinda harsh and asked the lady to forgive her for it. The main character didn't think it was a big deal, 'cause she would have said the same thing if she were in Ho Seongji's shoes. The healer confessed that when a noble treats her like that, she doesn't even know what to do with herself. Xia said she gets it, and Ho Seongji's face lit up, and she thanked her right away. The main character admitted she came to thank Ho Seongji for helping the kids at Xionyuan. The princess had a great idea, to teach the kids the art of healing no matter where they come from. That's why I was so sure Ho Seongji would be perfect for this. People always said Lady Xia was a tough cookie. But the girl never imagined she had such a profound goal, wanting to educate orphaned kids. The healer realized they hadn't properly introduced themselves yet, so she told the lady her name. She lost her parents as a kid, and now lives with her uncle, who used to be a royal physician and will definitely be interested in this offer. Sure, he likes a drink, but he's out after 1 cup, so he doesn't drink much and sobers up fast. That man's not the type to show up to a patient tipsy. Ho Seongji figured her uncle must have had a case where he couldn't save a kid, which is why he's now afraid of them. But the students learning medicine will be at least 12 years old, so it'll be all right. Honestly, nothing like this had ever happened before, so Ho Seongji was surprised and figured her uncle had just passed out from the booze. This girl decided she had to get her uncle to quit drinking, or she'd lose him way too soon. "Ho Young-tae, you say?" the bearded man grumbled. The lead girl stated confidently, adding that this guy used to work in the Royal Medical Service. The old man confirmed it, adding, Ho Young-tae was a real scholar, straight shooter, no weirdness about him. The old man didn't know why Ho Young-tae left, just said something came up back home, family stuff. After that day, the princess heard that Uncle Ho Young-tae had accepted her offer. Turns out he was a royal physician, and despite the first impression, he had a killer reputation at Nawiwan. Just when things were finally starting to calm down at Seunwon, a new problem popped up: money. The only answer Shia could see was to find a way to make some cash. When it gets cold, all those people out on the streets are still going to need a place to crash. If we're thinking about Seunwon's future, we can't rely solely on the princess's land income. In other words, we need more cash, but Guy was stumped on how to get it. Shia suggested using slaves with good sewing and embroidery skills to make stuff, so we'd have a steady income. And kids with a knack for crafts could become financially independent early on. Last time, the main character overheard at the tavern that some rich dude got loaded using one method. It was all about buying up and hoarding. You buy up all of a certain good and stash it in a warehouse, and when demand goes through the roof and the price jumps, you sell it for a huge profit. Yeah, it screws up the market, it's a shady move, but in slow-moving Joseon with its small market, it was an easy way to get rich quick. It's also called cornering the market, or just being a hoarder.